Okay, good morning, everyone. Meeting is called to order. Let's start with the roll call, starting from my right, Albert.
Albert Wong, professional member.
Alan Chad, professional licensee member.
Amy Gutierrez, professional licensee member.
Greg Lippy, professional public member.
Victor Law, licensee member.
Stan Weiser, professional licensee, still in need of 15 units for my next license renewal.
Ricardo Sanchez, public member.
Debbie Veal, professional licensee member.
Okay, quorum is established. So this is my first meeting as a president of this board. So number one, first, I want to thank all my board members for electing me. Hopefully I won't disappoint you. And second, I want you all to thank me, to join me in giving a big hand to our past president, Dr. Amy Gutierrez.
So Victor, just remember recall. We can still do a recall.
Thank you, Victor. Thanks.
Yeah, I want to thank Amy for the past 3 years. I think we accomplished a lot. The advanced practice, the still compounding, and the foreign language label. I think we accomplished a lot. I think she did a great job. I appreciate very much. Thank you, Amy.
I'd also like to say that I appreciate everything you've done, Amy. You've really helped me out on the board, and coming in as a public member, not knowing how it all worked, and you really did put it together, and I appreciate your mentoring on that, and did a great job. Thank you.
I'd say something, but it's getting kind of thick in here. But thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's been 3 years that Amy has been doing it, so thank you very much, Amy.
And the work continues.
With Amy as past president, and then with Stan, he did a good job too a few years ago. It's a big shoe to fill in. Stan has always been my mentor. He's a very inspiring guy. I learned all that from him. So thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we could start. Let's do a little house cleaning here. Pharmacists and pharmacy technicians who attend in person may be awarded 6 hours of CE in accordance with the board's CE policy. Sign in and sign out on the day of the meeting will be required for the CE questions. For questions or verification of the meeting, call Laura Hendricks at 916-574-7918 or access the board's website at www.pharmacy.ca.gov. Okay, all right, we're good. Now on the agenda, item number 2 is public comments on items not on the agenda. So any people want to come up? Oh, Danny?
Morning, board members. Danny Martinez, California Pharmacists Association. I'd like to also take a minute and thank Amy for her work, and thank you for allowing me to not make me look like a complete fool my first year. So thank you for that.
There's still time, Danny.
The year is up, Greg. The year is up. I'd like to briefly ask the board to consider an item for a future agenda relating to pharmacy ownership. Recently, we've gotten a lot of calls complaining about the issue of when a new pharmacy is for sale. It's being treated as a new pharmacy, which means that under new ownership, and it has to have a new number for a license. While that has generally been the practice, at a time where, particularly in LA County, where we have the existing moratorium on pharmacy, it's become very problematic for a lot of pharmacies in terms of delaying being able to set up and move forward. When it's treated as a new pharmacy, it has to be a new entity with a new number. All the contracts that it currently has have to be negotiated, and that takes a lot of time, and therefore could delay patient care. And we've seen some instances now where where there is a new pharmacy, it really takes months for them to get off the ground.
Danny, you're talking about the Medi-Cal moratorium, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, just to clarify.
And so, I just like the board, and I'm not sure which committee would exactly see this, but just a further discussion or consideration, maybe revisit the policies, see if anything needs to change.
Specifically, Danny?
Yes.
What are you requesting?
I'm requesting that the board reevaluate the policies of why a pharmacy needs a new license number as opposed to being able to keep its existing one even if it's for sale. Because when it has a new license number, you have to renegotiate everything that it had in place. And so whether it's a contract with a PBM, whether it's Medi-Cal, whether it's anything else, that entire process takes a lot of time.
So essentially, they can't dispense
Correct.
without that new
Right.
license, and so essentially they go out of business between sales?
Well, they don't.
Submit a claim.
They can't submit a claim, so I don't think it's not even a matter of going out of business. I don't think they can start a business until everything is done.
They're paying rent and everything, and they can't.
And
get
so,
going.
and so I'm just saying, because of the calls we received, I just like the board to see if they consider revisiting the policy, see if anything needs changing, see if everything is still in existence.
And I think, to your point, Danny, I think the other addition is that the exceptions to the moratorium are chain drug stores. So they actually can apply for Medi-Cal.
Yes.
But the independents are kind of discriminated because they can't.
Correct. And then, in fact, we had one.
An independent can do it if they have more than one location.
I think it's, I have to look
I
up
mean,
the
that's why the
actual
chains
number.
can do it. That's why the chains can do it, is
What's the
because if you have more
reasoning
than
for
one
that?
location.
I think
you-
it's,
you
I
use
think
the
it's,
other
I don't, I think
locations.
it's more than one. I'll look up the law, but I think it's more than one, Debbie. I think it's if you have a series of pharmacies.
Correct.
You can do that. But I
And-
think
I
it's,
think all you have to do is you have to have another pharmacy that is in good standing with a provider number with Medi-Cal, and you run your prescriptions under that provider number.
And just so this board is aware, CPHA is working with DHCS to revisit the need for the moratorium. This temporary moratorium has been in existence since 1999, and even the legislature at this point is getting frustrated with this. So we're working with DHCS to try and fix this issue. But in the meantime, like I said, we just like the board to revisit its policies on this. So thank you.
That would be a good item on the
Licensing.
license committee. Okay, thank you, Danny. Any other public? Seeing none? Okay, then let's move on to agenda item number 3. Discussion and consideration of Senate Bill 1298, Skinner, the Increasing Access to Employment Act. Let me give you a little background on that one. Existing law requires the Department of Justice to maintain state summary criminal history information and requires the Attorney General to furnish every conviction of an offense rendered against an applicant to the board upon request. DOJ is required to provide the board with every conviction for which registration as a sex offender is required. Every conviction that occur within 10 years of the date of the request, or every conviction for which the person was incarcerated within 10 years of the require for information for specified employment purposes. Currently, the law requires when state summary criminal history information is furnished as a result of specified requests, and the information is to be used for employment, licensing, or certification purposes, that the requester furnish the information to the person to whom the information relates if the information is a basis for an adverse employment, licensing, or certification decision. Now, the bill would prohibit the DOJ from releasing the record of convictions that were dismissed pursuant to specified provisions. And it also will reduce the requirement for DOJ to report convictions for which registration as a sex offender is required from 10 years to the prior 7 years, or for which the person was incarcerated or on probation or parole within 7 years of the request be provided. It also required the board to furnish a copy of the criminal offender record information to the subject of the request and would require the department to allow the subject a reasonable opportunity of not less than 5 days to challenge the accuracy or completeness of any matter contained in the CORI prior to consideration for licensure. It's also required the DOJ to make specified corrections prior to furnishing the information to the requester. There's a copy of this bill is provided in the attachment. So the staff recommend that this measure is being brought to the committee to seek input on the policy of this measure. The board staff has significant policy concerns that this measure will negatively impact the board's ability to thoroughly review and consider criminal arrests and/or convictions of applicants and licensees. The policy being put forth in this measure runs contrary to the board's consumer protection mandate, as well as efforts by the legislature to strengthen the ability of programs within the DCA to more robustly protect consumers. Creating barriers or limiting information, the board can consider when making a licensing decisions, and enforcement action will undo gains the board has made in this area and significantly undermine the board's consumer protection mandate. Currently, board staff only denies applications for criminal conviction history when the nexus can be established between the crime and the qualifications, functions, or duties of the business or profession. As part of the licensing decisions, mitigation and rehabilitations are considered. The author states that a criminal conviction history review is a barrier to employment that negatively impacts Californians. Therefore, the author is seeking to remove barriers to these individuals' ability to gain employment. While this policy may be appropriate for some professionals, it does not appear appropriate for individuals working in healthcare-related fields. This bill is substantially similar to AB 2138, which the board voted to oppose at the May 3rd meetings. So any comments from the board member first?
Well, I know we have to get public comment, but I'll make a motion to oppose.
Okay, there's a motion to second by Stan. Okay, any other board members' comments? No? Okay, public comments. No public comments at all? Okay, so we have a vote. Let's call for the votes. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Oppose? Abstain? Okay, so the motion carried. Thank you. Thank you. All right, agenda item number 4. Discussion and consideration of Senate Bill 1109, Controlled Substance, Schedule II drugs, opioids. All right, let me give you a little history on this. The California Uniform Controlled Substances Act classified opioids as Schedule II controlled substances and places restrictions on the prescription of those drugs, including prohibiting refills and specifying the requirements of a prescription for these drugs. Additionally, the Business and Professions Code requires the Board of Pharmacy to promulgate regulations that require a standardized patient-centered prescription drug label on all prescription medicine dispensed to patients in California. Existing Business and Professions Code requires physicians and surgeons to complete a continuing education course on pain management. Although nurse practitioners, certified nurse midwives, and physician assistants have limitation as to their authority to prescribe Schedule II drugs. Those that do not subject to continuing education requirements on Schedule II drugs. The current Health and Safety Code statutes requires a school district, charter school, or private school, as well as youth sports organizations that elect to offer an athletic program to take specified actions if an athlete is suspected to have sustained a concussion or to obtain a signed concussion and head injury information sheet from the athlete and the parents or guardians before the athlete initiate practice or competition. Now, this bill would require existing continuing education courses for all prescribers to include the risk of addiction and overdose associated with the use of Schedule II controlled substances. It required a warning label on all Schedule II controlled substance prescription bottles on the associated addiction and overdose risk. It also required a minor's or a parent's or guardian's signatures after a required consultation with the prescriber for any minor receiving an initial opioid prescription. It also required an information sheet on the risk of opioids to be signed by the minor athlete and the minor athlete's parents or guardians before participation in organized team sports. So a copy of this SB 1109 is provided following this memo. So at its May 3rd, 2018 meeting, the board voted to take an opposed unless amended position on this measure and directed staff to explore other labeling options while preserving the education and consultation provisions of the measure. Since that meeting, staff has worked with the author's office to draft the following amendments that would require a pharmacist consultation anytime a controlled substance is dispensed. In the last amended version of this measure, the labeling provision remains unchanged. So the proposed amendment added a section 4766.1, number A. All controlled substances, medication dispensed must be accompanied by consultation by a pharmacist licensed by the board, consistent with the duty to consult regulations promulgated by the board. A pharmacist, before dispensing any controlled substances medication to a patient or the patient's agent for the first time, shall provide oral consultation before dispensing the medication. The consultation provided pursuant to this section must include 1. Appropriate prescribed use of the medication. 2. The importance of following prescribed directions. 3. Adverse effects, common side effects, and contraindications, and what action is required if such effects or contraindications occur. 4. Dangers of misuse or addiction. 5. Dangers of pilfering from the household medicine cabinet. 6. Appropriate disposal following completion of therapy. 7. Possible use of opioid reversal agents to prevent overdose. The pharmacist is required to initiate the consultation before dispensing the medication to the patient. Any declination of consultation must be made by the patient or a patient's agent directly to the pharmacist. When consultation by the pharmacist is declined, the pharmacist shall then advise the patient that he or she is being dispensed a serious drug that can cause adverse effects or addiction if not taken appropriately. So at this meeting, the board will have the opportunity to review and discuss the proposed amendment. Should the board agree with the staff recommendation, the following motion could be used. The motion would approve the appropriate amendment and change the board position to support if the amendment is accepted by the author. Okay, comments from the board? Yes, Dan,
I've got a few comments, if I may.
go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, staff, we oppose this and ask staff to work on other labeling options. And staff's, what we got here now is no other labeling options, but additional consultation requirements of the pharmacist, some that I have some really curiosities about at best. So I guess my first question is, what happened with our initial oppose unless amended regarding labeling?
Yeah, that was the whole reason why we did it.
Well, that was the original, yeah.
So the board was very clear that it didn't see any value in putting a flag label or something that would
Right.
otherwise connote to someone that this is something special about this container in a pharmacy or in the home, kind of like a zoning in kind of function.
Right.
So instead, we discussed informally, and I drafted what you see in front of you as an additional consultation requirement, recognizing that already the prescriber is going to initiate consultation at the time of prescribing, but then the pharmacist, as the provider of the pharmaceutical care, needs to reinforce that initial consultation. And so that's where this came from. The specific parameters were lifted out of various legislative proposals that exist either at the federal or state level in other states. And this is pretty standard for where
The
we're going.
alternative, Jenny, the alternative is fine, but you don't take away the requirement to have the label give that warning. The whole idea was to get rid of the warning and find an alternative. So that's a good alternative, but there's nowhere in that amendment that says to eliminate the warning.
Well, that was conveyed to the author's office, that the board is opposed because the additional label, there's already a lot of real estate. There was concern that it would flag people that are looking for a reason to take the drug to go straight to this particular container and avoid the other ones. And that was part of the discussion.
But shouldn't we include it in the amendment?
Well, wait a minute,
It was, the OUA was to remove the labeling requirement.
but we didn't.
But we didn't. Yeah.
But the other thing, Greg, is
But
I'm not.
they haven't taken the amendment yet either, and that would be part of when it was conveyed, when this language was conveyed to the author, it was that the board would like to see the warning label removed and instead go in this approach.
What's the
I
status
would- I
of
would
this
like-
bill?
I'm
Bill's
sorry.
still pending, it just crossed into the second house.
Okay.
I would like to make a comment, Greg. You said that this is a good alternative. I think.
I said maybe a good alternative.
Okay, well, I think
didn't
where
say it
Stan's
is.
going
Oh,
is,
come on.
I'm in alignment. I don't think this is a good alternative. I think that this puts an undue, first off, if it's a first fill, some of these things are already required. The
have
pharmacist
to.
already has to consult, and the pharmacist already has to go through some of these items. But I don't think that this is appropriate, maybe that's not the right word. I don't think we want to put, if the person says no, then the pharmacist has to grab them and say, sorry, Ricardo.
Don't grab
But,
Ricardo.
grab them and say, wait a minute, you can't go away, I got to tell you a couple more things.
That actually came from the Pharmacists Association, that particular supplement.
Okay, well, I'll wait and hear from the Pharmacists Association, because I'd be shocked if they did. But I've been wrong in the past. I know you guys are
We did
shocked. I'm
discuss that
admitting
at
to
the
that.
last meeting. and
But the other
I
thing is,
agreed.
I think that the problem is the prescriber, and so we're making the prescriber take some CE, but we're not making the prescriber stop the person and have a chat. I mean, opioids start with the prescriber.
There is a requirement in the bill to require the
Well, wait,
prescriber.
show me where it is, because I keep reading this over and over, and I keep seeing CE,
couldn't find
mandatory.
it
So, can I actually,
Continuing education,
I agree
don't
with,
see.
I agree with Debbie, and I think we need to make sure, if we're going to add additional things, there needs to be some value add here.
Yeah.
And if there's some counseling that's already required to the patient, why are we doing this in addition? I agree with you.
Yeah, because
I-
don't you think,
it-
I'm afraid we're
it's-
putting the pharmacist at a they leave the doctor's office the prescription, then all of a sudden the pharmacist is like, blah, 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 blah.
No,
I mean,
Well,
you
as a
need
matter of
story.
fact, all these articulated specific objectives that we have to cover is almost an insult to the profession.
Well, not only, I mean, it is out, from my point of view, so I'm at Stan's Drug once again, and in comes a woman who has just finished a surgical procedure, and the doctor has given her a prescription for, let's say, Norco or something. And she's come from the surgical theater to my pharmacy with a prescription for a pain pill, and she wants to get home, and she wants to be able to recover. And we're talking about maybe 16 Norco tablets. So besides the normal consultation, this woman and I have to go through this whole dialogue about how you discard it and how dangerous it is, and all the other requirements that are well, some of them are duplicate, but some of them are a little bit outrageous. And when she says to me, I don't want to hear this. I just want to get my pills, go home, take a pill, and start recovering her. And I have to stop her and say, but wait a second. You can't go until I'm done, and I'm going to give you a consultation whether or not you want it, or whether or not you're going to decline it. And and here I have this poor woman standing out there in front of me who just wants to go home and recover, and I'm carrying on about where to store these and how to protect them from their
And Stan,
grandkids
reality
taking-
is
it's outrageous.
It's probably not the woman standing in front of you, it's probably her husband, and she's sitting out in the car.
Well, whoever's in for the prescription, it isn't a pleasant experience for any of us.
Is there another approach the board would prefer to go then, since we don't want to label the container, we don't want the pharmacist? I think the consultation part is an important opportunity for the pharmacist to step forward as a healthcare professional.
But we already require consultation.
Exactly, and these are just the elements that you would include as part of the consultation. That's what I saw that as, is that.
But why
well,
do
you're-
we need to delineate to the pharmacist how to counsel a patient? I mean, this is very detailed, and I agree with Stan. I mean, if it's a person that really needs to get out there, I don't know how this is really public protection. We're supposed to do that already as pharmacists. We should know how to counsel a patient, otherwise we shouldn't be doing that job.
This is unnecessary,
All
this
right.
delineation of what to say. It's almost like, gotcha, you didn't say that.
Oh, I don't, God, we wouldn't be there probably for the consultation anyway, and I don't think that was the intent. But this is the
Not the
gist of
intent,
where
but-
other states are going and the federal government itself with respect to some responses. And this is an important opportunity for the pharmacist to step forward. But you're right, there already is a consultation requirement in
Right.
place. And so, and if you don't want to do that, what amendment would you like that would get us where we need to be, that we can offer Senator Bates on
Well,
this?
you mentioned that CPHA supported this. I would like to hear from CPHA because, Annie, are you,
Well, she said that they supported that we
They
don't let the
added
person
admi-
leave the
they add- they-
counter.
I ran it past their lobbyist, and
Who's now walking up?
he specifically requested that there be a cautionary statement provided to the patient that declines the consultation to let them know that this isn't just another drug that you may have in your cabinet. This one comes with special concerns, and you should make certain that you're aware of them.
Okay, you want to clarify that?
So Danny Martinez is CPHA. So yes, our lobbyist did not give this language to the senator. And I'll admit, I wasn't involved in that. I know that my superiors were involved in that discussion with the senator, but I did clarify before I come to the meeting that this language was not something that we supported. And if I may, I mean, kind of what's a little bit of repeating of what's already been said, we don't feel comfortable at all having pharmacists say after a patient has declined a consultation that, well, you decline this consultation. By the way, let me consult you on the dangers of these opioids. And in fact, one of our arguments on a previous bill that had this a more strict requirement for that, our argument back then was we don't want the pharmacist to become a law enforcement official. That's not their job. And their job in using their pharmacist's discretion and their judgment, their professional judgment, if they feel they need to consult a patient, then that's their decision. But on the same coin, if the patient doesn't want to do a consult, pharmacist has no. That's the end of the conversation as far as we're concerned. And we do absolutely believe in the patient's right to decline consult. It's unfortunate because oftentimes patients go home and they take medication incorrectly, and but again, the pharmacist's judgment. In our opinion, we should not put them as a law enforcer. We should put them as a healthcare provider, and we don't believe we don't support this. We want to make that very clear. We don't support this amendment. And going back to the original question of what happened to the labeling provision, I was going to point that out, but I'm glad the board already pointed it out. That part is still not addressed in this proposed amendment. Now, I'll be honest, and I'm not exactly privy to what conversation CPHA, my boss, has had with Senator Bates. I'd be happy to clarify that and come back to you guys. I've actually put in a text to my boss, and I'm hoping that he responds soon. But as far as I know, this amendment, this language is not supported by CPHA.
All right, thank you, Danny.
So if I could just make another comment. When I kind of flipped through this 1109, it appears to me, for the most part, Jenny, it's going through all the healthcare professionals and asking them to require continuing education. And then it has this section about if you're in school and a kid's in school, that the parents and the kid have to understand, opioids and they're serious. So I don't feel like this is the place to put in an obligation of, what pharmacists are going to do and the persons in front of us. If we want to, because we're not even asking, the nurses, the doctors, the dentists, all the people listening here to have any consultation. We're just asking them to do continuing education. I don't even think we need to ask the pharmacists to do continuing education because I think it's part of our, what we already do in school.
Well, it would be part of the CE component, too, that we're already doing on CE law, because there are a lot of laws that affect.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of see this isn't something that this isn't our dog fight to be in.
Is there any alternative amendment that you would like? We took an OUA. There was no real focus on what amendment the board wanted to remove its opposition, that putting that amendment in, other than to remove the labeling requirement. Is there something that the board would like to suggest then and go in that direction? Or is it flat out just repeal or just remove the flagging of the prescription part and just let it go at that?
I think our original position is still current.
Yeah,
Okay. I
agree.
except that
You
one
wanna-
of the things that's in here, though, and I think it's important, that when somebody does decline, that they decline it to the pharmacist and not to a clerk.
Well, that's already our law.
That's already
Right.
required.
Okay, well then, I don't understand why it's
I think
added again.
another thing to remember is, and we're seeing this in my organization, that there are patients that are waiting and looking for patients that are getting opioids and following them into the parking lot. So by giving them this special treatment, we may even be signaling them out for that type of exposure to the member as well.
Well,
to
let me ask you
patient.
something. Let's go back. You said it's already a requirement that when you decline a consult, that it has to be done to the pharmacist.
Right.
Well, that's not what happens when I go into a pharmacy.
That's part of the problem.
Well, but we're not going to fix.
That's a different issue.
Yeah, we're not going to fix that with this. But technically, in our regs, it says, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to touch your book, Laura. But in our regs, it says that the consultation is supposed to be offered by the pharmacist.
And the declining goes to
declined,
the
yeah, and
pharmacist.
declined to the pharmacist.
So that
You
isn't even a
mean the
big
little
stretch.
box doesn't count?
Okay,
If this is the wrong approach, if the board would just simply prefer remove the labeling requirement, and
Yeah.
then we're done, to
Right.
remove our opposition, we can do that.
Yep.
Yeah, but we want to explain
What about
why.
this new consultation stuff?
No, and that goes away.
Oh, okay.
Right.
okay.
And we want to explain that the reason why is because it would attract somebody to steal or whatever.
That you're concerned that it'll just highlight the wrong thing.
Right,
Well, conveying a warning, it also has the detrimental impact as well.
exactly.
And we
Well, the
want to
senator's
support that
office
the other.
hasn't taken
Oh,
the
we-
amendment yet anyway. It was offered about a month ago, but she hasn't moved to amend the bill. I think they're waiting for this.
I mean, I think we want to support that the other healthcare professionals have, CE on opioids. So I think we want to support that. We just don't want to point out which bottle.
So,
It's an important bill, I think, for the board to support,
Right, so we would love to support it.
with or without this in it.
so to encapsulate, if you'll excuse the expression, everything, I would like to make a motion to continue our oppose unless amended, but also oppose this new proposed amendment.
Well, I don't think we even have to do that. Couldn't you just make a motion to maintain our current position?
And no amendment, just remove the flag, or
Right.
the labeling
I mean,
requirement that currently
that's
exists
our
in the bill.
current position is.
So Laura, what's the best way to handle that as a motion?
I don't think the board needs to take a motion because your existing position is oppose unless amended.
Oh,
So
okay.
the board doesn't need to
Okay.
take action
Oh.
if it would like to just retain the existing.
And our amendment was to remove the label.
That's my recollection.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, cool.
okay,
Hey,
that's
thank
cool.
you.
All right, any other public comment?
Thank you, Danny, by the way.
Somebody is coming up?
Run, hurry. I'm kidding.
Too late.
But it was kind of fun watching you.
I know, thanks. Jennifer Snyder on behalf of the California Retailers Association and National Association of Chain Drugstores. We were here to, along with CPHA, just to express some concerns with the amendments. Really do appreciate the board trying to be proactive and look at different options, but we did have concerns about the pharmacists and patient relationship and what that would do with that. I was just, as I was sitting in the audience listening to the discussion, this is just me talking, but I do know that there are provisions in regulation that talk about pharmacist consultation, and it's based on pharmacist discretion. There might be an option to look at what are those listed provisions that a pharmacist should consider, and see if there's something in there that could be added. Under pharmacist discretion, it's kind of like a best practice. It's look at these elements, maybe look at a few more if it's an opioid, and see whether or not there's other elements maybe that a pharmacist should consider. And so that was one thing that came to mind that allows for pharmacist discretion, but it also encourages maybe a few more things now that we're a lot more sensitive to the use of opioids. So thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Okay, with that being said, we're okay. We all set? Fine? Okay, let's move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item number 5 is the petition for reinstatement of licensure or reduction of penalty. Do we have you want,
Close
the ALJ is not here yet? Okay, let's take a break so we can have the judge set up for the hearings. Thank you. Okay, Your Honor, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I know prior to the recess, well, I don't know that, but Mr. President, do we have a roll call, a call to order?
Yeah, we do. Let's start with my left here with Debbie.
Hi, Debbie Veal, professional license member.
Ricardo Sanchez, public member.
Stan Weiser, licensed member.
Victor Law, professional licensee member.
And
Greg
President of
Lippy,
the board.
public member.
I'm sorry. And Vice President of the board.
And Vice President.
Amy Gutierrez, professional licensee member.
Alan Shad, professional licensee member.
Albert Wong, professional member.
All right, very good, thank you. It's my understanding, Mr. Law, that this is a board with 13 members and that we have 8 members present. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so, in fact, we have a quorum for today's proceedings?
We do.
All right, very good. So, good morning. My name is Erin Koch-Goodman, and I am an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I'm here assigned to preside over several petition hearings that the board has calendared on its agenda today. I'm going to first ask for appearances on behalf of the public of the state of California.
Yes, good morning, Your Honor, and the Board of Pharmacy. I am Deputy Attorney General Christina Jarvis. I'm appearing here on behalf of the Attorney General for the people of the state of California, solely pursuant to Government Code Section 11522 and Business and Professions Code Section 4309. My role here is not adversarial, but is solely intended to protect the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have 5 petitions. We're going to start with the petition of Ms. Tarr, and so I'd like to do an appearance for the record. Counsel, please.
Oh,
Down at the very bottom.
Of the board.
Nope, it's a green
push
light.
that,
All
No,
the light on.
Try this one.
that works.
Good morning, Your Honor. Good morning, members of the board. Ivan Petrzelka on behalf of Dr. Vicky Tarr.
Okay, I think we're going to need you to speak up just a little bit, and I don't know if we can adjust that microphone. No. Okay, so we're just going to need you to speak up a bit.
Ivan Petrzelka on behalf of Dr. Vicky Tarr.
All right. I hope that'll work, and if not, we'll interrupt you profusely and ask you to speak up. Prior to going on the record this morning, I spoke with each of the petitioners in a group with Ms. Jarvis and indicated to them that they will be given an opportunity today to be put under oath and provide information to the board regarding their petition. I reminded each of the petitioners who are present today before us that they need not repeat the information that's already in their petitioner packet because that has previously been provided to the board, and the board has reviewed each of the petitioner packets. So I'll remind the petitioners again now that the board is in particular interest and concern with their rehabilitation since the conduct in question. Today, we have Ms. Tarr before us first. She has an attorney present, and so I will begin with opening statements on behalf of each side, beginning with Ms. Jarvis by the people of the state of California, and then I will provide under oath testimony from Ms. Tarr if she would like, and then questions from the board. Ms. Jarvis?
Thank you, Your Honor. A brief history of this case. On August 23, 2010, petitioner was issued her pharmacist license. In 2011 or 2012, she met someone at a party who asked if she could fill his prescription for oxycodone, Norco, and Xanax. This individual gave her the prescription right there at the party.
Ms. Tarr, it's the 5th petition.
Okay. I beg your pardon.
No problem. Petitioner documented that she called the prescribing physician's office the following day, and someone at the office confirmed that it was a valid prescription. Petitioner was later asked to refill this prescription and did so without reconfirming the prescription. This same individual then sent 6 more individuals to petitioner with similar prescriptions, all from the same doctor. All of these prescriptions were paid for in cash. Petitioner did not confirm any of these additional 6 prescriptions. Ultimately, it was discovered that all of the prescriptions were fake and were written on a stolen prescription pad. In 2014, petitioner pled guilty to 6 misdemeanor counts of violating Health and Safety Code Section 11368, forging or issuing false prescriptions, or obtaining or possessing drugs secured by a forged prescription. On November 4th, 2013, the board filed an accusation against petitioner. In February of 2015, a hearing was held before an administrative law judge. A proposed decision was issued which recommended revocation of petitioner's license. This decision was adopted by the board. Petitioner thereafter filed a request for reconsideration, and both written and oral argument was provided to the board. After these additional arguments, the board issued a decision after reconsideration, which became effective on August 24th, 2015, revoking petitioner's license. It has been more than 2 years since that date, and therefore petitioner is eligible today to petition for reinstatement. In the intervening 2 years, petitioner has taken steps to rehabilitate herself, which she provided evidence of in her petition packet. First, it should be noted that there is no allegation that petitioner did any of these actions for her own gain. She was not taking these pills, nor did she benefit financially from doing so. The Ralph's Pharmacy where she was employed may have benefited slightly, but that's pretty speculative. In February of 2017, petitioner completed her criminal probation term. In September of 2017, petitioner's conviction was expunged pursuant to Penal Code Section 1203.4. Petitioner has provided additional continuing education certificates that she will provide to the board today, but with her petition packet, she provided 84.25 hours solely for January through October of 2017. This includes a pharmacy ethics and professionalism course of 22 credits with both a 6 and a 12-month follow-up course. She has completed the 6-month follow-up. The 12-month is scheduled for November of this year. Petitioner provided 13 letters of recommendation, 5 of which were verified. One comment about the verification process: generally, the board staff's policy is to verify 4 letters. They will make phone calls until they verify those 4. If in the meantime, another person calls back and verifies, there may be more than 4 letters verified throughout the petitions we discussed today. However, generally, just because letters were not verified doesn't mean they were not verifiable. And I hope that distinction is clear. So 13 letters were provided, 5 were verified. 3 of those were from pharmacists, 2 were from citizens, 1 a retired police detective, and the other an active firefighter. The other 8 letters come from 3 more pharmacists, 2 pharmacy technicians, 2 from the wellness coordinator and the lead care coordinator of New Directions for Women, a drug and alcohol rehabilitation center where petitioner volunteers, and then a business director at her previous employer also wrote a letter. Each of the letters, naturally, paint a glowing and rehabilitated picture of petitioner. It should be noted, however, that each author also expresses they are aware of the decision, several of them have read the decision, and each of them state that they believe that petitioner's conduct was a danger to the public. However, they all express the growth that they have seen in petitioner over the past several years. Finally, petitioner's attorney wrote a 3-page letter advocating for her reinstatement, and maybe most importantly, petitioner herself provided an approximately 7-page written statement. In this statement, she accepts responsibility for her bad judgment, discusses the red flags these prescriptions presented, and expresses an understanding of the importance and the privilege of practicing pharmacy. The only off note in this statement is that she asserts that the, quote, pharmacy school curriculum did not prepare her for the function of a gatekeeper, close quote. So while she does, throughout this petition packet, accept responsibility for her acts, I felt that that statement also tried to deflect a bit of the blame off of herself. She was a very young pharmacist at the time that all this occurred. She didn't have a lot of experience, but I hope that she takes full responsibility here today. At this time, I'd like to submit the exhibits.
Yes, please.
Okay, if I may approach.
Yes. So, Ms. Jarvis, the first packet is the petition that was submitted by the petitioner, correct?
It is. So Exhibit 1 is the petition for reinstatement of licensure with all of the attachments submitted by petitioner prior to today.
All right.
Exhibit 2 is then the stipulated settlement and disciplinary order for her case number 4911.
All right, I'll also indicate that the Office of Administrative Hearings has given this matter, the petition itself, a case number, and that is 2018-051-209. All right, thank you, Ms. Jarvis. Mr. Petrzelka, would you like to give an opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. First of all, we'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present this petition on behalf of Ms. Starr. Can you hear me?
Get as close as you can.
Okay. Thank you. We understand that these petitions are not granted easily and for the right reason. The board's mandate to protect the public is very strong, and we applaud the board for its diligence. However, we have a case where the petitioner had experienced significant professional and personal growth during the period of time when her license was revoked. As Ms. Jarvis summed it up, the revocation took effect on August 24th of 2015. The underlying conduct had occurred approximately 6 years ago, in 2012. Dr. Tarr had recognized very quickly after the incident in question that what she has done was wrong, and she has amended her ways. The principal cause for the discipline was the criminal conviction arising out of improper handling of controlled substances. And it was a youthful indiscretion of an impressionable pharmacist who unfortunately allowed herself, her professional judgment to lapse in a particularly bad way with respect to the potential risk to the public. The conduct in question was dangerous, and she recognized that very quickly. She recognizes that today. The principal reasons for granting this petition is not necessarily limited to the passage of time. We understand that passage of time in and of itself is not sufficient for petition for reinstatement. We believe that the principal reason is the strong rehabilitation effort that Dr. Tarr had put forth during the period of time since her license was disciplined. It is not an effort that was limited to few months prior to filing the petition, as we've seen a number of times. This has been an effort that has been going on for the entire period of her revocation. She maintained her employment within the healthcare industry, even though she didn't have to. She was not allowed to practice pharmacy. Nevertheless, she put forth a very strong effort to maintain her involvement in healthcare industry and to improve the lives of the patients, and she will testify to that. She went above and beyond the mere requirements of her probation, of her criminal probation. As the testimony and documentation will show, she had undergone an extensive ethics course of her own volition at a considerable expense to rehabilitate herself and to learn more about the risks associated with lapses of judgment that she demonstrated 6 years ago. She also engaged in an extensive community service and volunteer services in a center for rehabilitation, where she has the opportunity to firsthand experience the effects of abuse and diversion of controlled substances. Day in and day out, she is interacting with victims of drug abuse, and she has the opportunity to recognize in depth the risks that are associated with that. And with that, I would like Dr. Tarr to testify on her behalf.
All right. Why don't we put that microphone closer to Ms. Tarr? Ms. Tarr, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. You are going to have to get quite close to that microphone to make sure that we can all hear you, all right? The floor is yours.
Good. Good morning, Ms. Tarr. Would you be able to give us a brief outline of the rehabilitation efforts that you have undertaken since the time your license has been revoked in 2015?
Well, since 2015, I've participated in or completed over 112 continuing education credits, focusing on not only keeping up on my clinical skills, but also focusing on pharmacy law and regulations and opioid abuse, diversion, and trying to be more familiar and about the red flags and what to look for, and continually reminding myself of the importance of the pharmacist's role in drug diversion and preventing further issues. I also began volunteering at New Directions for Women, where I, like Ivan said, I personally interact with all of the residents of the rehabilitation facility, and I take them to their different meetings, the AA meetings, drug rehabilitation meetings, and doctor's visits, and sit in on their meetings and participate with them to understand better their psyche and what my actions have kind of indirectly led to where they are. And it's really hit home to me, like the effect of my actions can lead to such detriment in patient harm. I still continue to volunteer there as often as I can, and so I continue to speak with the residents, and I share with them my story and why I'm there, because they do ask me, if I'm a graduate of the program, but I tell them no, but I do tell them my story and how I'm trying to make a change and affect them as well.
Thank you. Now, going back to the underlying conduct that led to your discipline, within the context of the current opioid crisis, do you recognize that you were a part of that problem?
I do recognize that, and with the opioid crisis, I recognize it's becoming a huge problem, and I do want to be a part of the solution versus being a contributor to the problem. And it actually hit home because I do have a family member out in New York that just died of an overdose because of the opioid crisis, and that really hit home, where we couldn't help him, and I want to take that and make a difference to prevent that from happening, and feeling that really wrenched my heart, and so I want to help prevent that with other family members as well.
Well, let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the board will grant your license back. Should you encounter prescriptions similar to those that you've encountered and you filled 6 years ago, what would you do today?
Well, I'm known to verify every single one and go above and beyond just calling and verifying and accepting whoever spoke to you on the phone. Can go through fax or, call and fax, and go through different methods of verification online, that the resources that we have available to, like the Cures website, and even going, maybe even if time permits, to call other pharmacies that aren't connected to the network to see if the same patient is participating in polypharmacy or similar means of trying to get the medication.
You believe that you have a good understanding of the requirements of corresponding responsibility of pharmacists?
I do, especially with my current job right now. I'm consistently reminded of the oath that we take when we when we graduate and get our degree. We take an oath to protect the public, and I'm consistently reminded of that. And I've, in the past 6, coming on 7 years, I've definitely developed a renewed respect for that oath, and understand the responsibilities and privilege of being a pharmacist and being responsible for the safety of my patients and the public.
Where do you currently work?
I currently work for Rockport Healthcare Services in Los Angeles. I'm the CEO of Dr. Michael Wasserman. He's a geriatrician, and it's a chain of nursing homes throughout California.
And could you briefly outline your employment history since the revocation of your license?
Yes, when my license was first revoked, I continued to work for the company that I was working for as a pharmacist, and I switched over to sales of our pharmacy products for 2 years after the revocation, and due to business purposes or downsizing, I was laid off. But then I got another job position at a telemedicine company called CallMD, where I helped facilitate and build business development, built the business with telemedicine, where the patient can call into a physician for acute issues and receive the care that they need without having to physically go into a doctor's office. And my current position now as an exec assistant of the CEO of Rockport Healthcare Services, I'm still using my pharmacy knowledge to help the CEO with projects that will help optimize and patient care in their nursing homes with medication therapy management and deprescribing and helping with patient risks and to better the care of the residents at the facilities.
Thank you. As part of your petition, you submitted a certificate of completion of the pharmacy ethics course. Was that something that was mandated as part of your probation or as part of your revocation process?
No, it was not mandated. I learned about the course, and I thought it would be beneficial to get more training, remind myself of what those red flags are, and with the class, it helped with coaching of what to do in certain situations so that I can gain experience from the other people that attended the course, as well as the instructor who lost his license due to for ethics reasons, and it helped with providing guidance and learning, and so that I can take that home with me and hopefully be able to use those, hopefully be able to use that knowledge if granted, the ability to do that again.
Did you find the course helpful?
Yes, it was very helpful.
What other areas of continuing education did you focus throughout the effort? You've submitted certificates of approximately 87 hours with your petition, and additionally, I believe you've submitted approximately 30 hours continuing education that occurred between the time of submission of the petition. Could you tell us what additional areas did you focus on? And Your Honor, may I present the certificates? They were emailed to the board members, but I would like to also present a copy.
All right, well, let me do two things. Ms. Jarvis, are you aware of the documents that council is bringing to me?
I am, Your Honor, and I have had a chance to review them.
All right. Mr. Petrozelka, do you want these marked as individual exhibits or all as one?
All as one, please.
All right. And let me just look right and left to the board members to ensure that they did, in fact, receive these extra petitions or certifications. I'm seeing all head shakes of yes. So I will mark them as Exhibit 3, since I'm just going to go in order. Would that be all right?
All right, thank you.
All right, very good.
Go.
The continuing education credits that I focused on, mostly on opioid abuse, the opioid crisis, red flags, pharmacy law, and then I also focused on where I've been where I've practiced and have the passion to continue practicing if allowed, with different aspects of community pharmacy, compounding pharmacy, and just to help with the maintain the clinical knowledge that is required to practice successfully and efficiently. And but I did really look into a lot into pharmacy law and the new drugs, and yeah, think that's most of it.
Thank you. And what area of practice do you intend to focus on should the board decide to grant your license?
I am enjoying my job position now, so I do like the idea of focusing on medication therapy management and optimizing patient treatment, and and focusing on patient safety and different patient risks, and going through their medications and making sure that what they're taking is optimal and not dangerous, and just keeping them safe while they're on treatment.
Do you believe that you can safely practice pharmacy? Can the board trust you?
Yes, I do believe that I can safely practice pharmacy. I've definitely learned from these experiences. It's been a very bumpy ride, so to speak, and I've had a lot of time to self-reflect and speak with others and learn from others, and be able to share my story with others. And when it first happened, I was embarrassed and shamed, and now over the years, I've been able to just embrace it and take my experience and share it with others, so to show them how real it is, and that our job and our mission as a pharmacist is not to be taken lightly and taken for granted, and we really need to be able to fulfill that responsibility to ourselves, to the profession, and to the people that we serve.
In your petition, you made a statement that you felt unprepared from the School of Pharmacy for handling the issues of corresponding responsibility. Can you elaborate on that? Did you intend that statement to deflect the blame from yourself for your decisions?
Not at all. I was just saying that you can learn everything that you learn in textbooks, but nothing really prepares you for real life. And sometimes when things hit you in the face, you don't know that it's happening until after it's happened. And that's all I meant by that. I didn't mean that school didn't prepare you and I'm trying to deflect it or say that I'm blaming school for my ignorance. I just I was just making a statement that you really don't know something until it happens, and you have to use that now that, it's happened, you use that experience to prevent that from happening again.
So at this point, you do realize that the ultimate decision is always yours as a pharmacist, and the responsibility is yours and not anybody else's?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Your Honor. Nothing further.
Ms. Jarvis, any questions for Ms. Tarr?
No, thank you.
All right, in that case, I'll turn to the board. Dr. Wong, any questions?
Yeah, I would like to know, as I understand, when you got those prescriptions, you call to confirm those prescriptions. How, and it's forgery, so who do you end up calling to confirm those prescriptions?
I called the number that was on the prescription pad.
But it turned out to be what, somewhere else, is not the real doctor's office?
I think so.
So
I never found out.
So somebody did answer and confirm everything, and it sounded legitimate to you?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Schott? Dr. Gutierrez?
Dr. Tarver, I was here during your original, when we first heard about this case. I just congratulate you for all of the rehabilitation that you've taken. Have you thought about at all telling your story to pharmacy students and letting them know the dangers of what to look out for, especially since, for Ms. Jarvis, that was one of the things you'd found, is you weren't prepared for this?
Yes, I've actually been looking into reaching back out to the, at least my the USC School of Pharmacy, and going back to the faculty and seeing if I can go and speak to the students about the dangers of filling fraudulent prescriptions and being more aware and how serious that this is, and not to take it for granted, so to speak, and not be arrogant and be cocky and not allow time constraints or corporate expectations or patient expectations to allow it to influence you and your judgment, and that it's not worth it, and that your professional duty is more important than anybody else's expectations.
Thank you. Mr. Lipa?
Oh,
Questions?
actually, I remember your case as well. And I remember that the greatest concern I had was that at the time you seemed weak and unable to say no. And that's how you got yourself into that problem. You seem stronger now. I think you've been through a lot, and that's good to hear. But I do have a question. When you were asked about how you would go about verifying, I think you mentioned that you might even call other pharmacies. Are you using, I mean, you wouldn't be using it now, but are you familiar with the Cures system?
A little bit, yeah. I don't have too much experience with it, but I am familiar enough with it to be able to
That
utilize
would
it.
be the database with the information, so you wouldn't have
Absolutely.
to be calling other pharmacies. I'm not a pharmacist, but I happen to know that. Anyway, I'm glad to see that you made it through, and congratulations on all the work you've done. I just hope you truly do have the ability to say no now.
My husband will tell you yes.
Great.
All right,
Thank you.
Mr. Law, questions?
Hi. Well, thank you for coming here. I know it must be hard for you to go through all these years, and I remember your case too. I just want to ask you, make sure that you know how to verify the prescription, as Dr. Wong was asking you. When you have a prescription, you said you call the number. Is that the phone number on the prescription blank that you call?
Correct.
You think that's the proper way to do it? Sometimes on a stolen prescription blank, the number would connect to someplace else instead of to the doctor.
Yeah, which is what I'm realizing, when I realized after the fact. So now I would know to do my research and look up the doctor's information alternatively to compare and contrast and see if there's a difference.
That's right. You should always either Google or find the right phone number to call. Make sure that you don't call the one just on the prescription blank,
Correct.
which turned out to be. And also, like Mr. Greg Lippy was mentioning, now they have something called Cures that would tell you where and when the patients fill all the prescriptions before. Now, tell me about your involvement with professional organization.
I've been more involved with APHA recently in the last 6 months. I've looked at the different conferences, and I'm trying to attend the next APHA annual conference. And I've been keeping in contact with all of my pharmacy colleagues to try to stay updated with the different things that are happening in the pharmacies, so that I can just be aware of what's going on, so that hopefully if I'm able to start practicing again, I'm more...
Have you ever been a member of CPHA or CSHP?
When I was in school, I was an active member of CSHP, APSA, AMCP, and even when I was actively practicing, I was still a member of those associations. I haven't been an active member just in recent years. So I didn't know that I was able to stay a member if I wasn't practicing
But
pharmacist.
after you graduate from SC, have you joined the membership right away, or did you
Yeah.
just didn't join it at all?
I was an active member for, I think, a year, and then all this happened, and I think it kind of fell off the wagon. But I do, if I am granted my license back, I do intend on rejoining the associations.
Because every time when you join the professional association, they always update you on all these current events that's happening.
Okay.
And then you'll be aware of all these opioid crisis and the requirements for filling of prescriptions. And I hope you will keep it up even if we grant you the license back.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Mr. Weiser?
I too was here. You have almost reconstituted most of the panel that you were before some time ago. Congratulations on your growth. And perhaps you could make this a learning experience for me. And so you were here during the discussion about the consultation and the new suggestions about consultation for controlled substances and how we as a group felt about some of the suggestions that were being made. So I'd like you to come back to behind the prescription counter, away from the desk that you currently sit behind. So what do you think about it? I mean, how would you consult a patient now, an opioid prescription for a patient, and do you see any areas that we ought to be more concerned about when it comes to the consultation of a patient?
I would look, well, with every controlled substance that I would fill, I would look at their drug history first and foremost, so that it would be prepared for the consultation. And I would ask and see if they've taken it before, or if they're medication naive. And I think personally, I would consult them without asking them if they want a consultation, just because it is mandated. And if it's that important to me that they know the information, to just tell them and let them know the potential side effects and how to properly take it, and the dangers of not taking it as prescribed. And because it takes 30 seconds to a minute of their time, and to get it out there would make me feel better than just simply saying that they declined the consultation.
Thank you. One additional lesson. So you talk about being prepared or unprepared, and I often have curiosities about the educational programs that are out there, whether it be at USC or any other school, and USC is certainly an outstanding pharmacy school. So the experiential part, I mean, my expectation when I was practicing pharmacy and I was mentoring students, it was important for me to make sure that they had the ability to observe every part of pharmacy, including the consultation, and get a sense about what the responsibilities of a pharmacist are. I mean, from my perspective as a board member here, that's part of the importance of the experiential part of the education. So does that work? Did that work for you, or did that not work for you?
That did work. When I was a student, when I was an intern, my staff pharmacist and pharmacy manager had me do 98% of the consultations, and that really did help in learning what the responsibilities are, and just even learning what the side effects are, and the black box warnings, and the dangers, and what to look out for in terms of the medication safety. And so that really did help and benefit a lot.
Thank you, and congratulations.
All right, Mr. Sanchez, questions?
Yes, I have a question, but first like to say thank you for your courage to come up here and talk to the board. Your efforts, everything you've done to rehabilitate yourself is commendable, and I thank you for that. I think you'll bring a lot of dignity or a lot of pride to the pharmacy industry. My question for you was, now your husband, does he still keep in touch, or do you keep in touch with this Della Serna individual who originally was a friend of your boyfriend, now husband?
No. I think if my husband ever saw him, he would be taken away for murder.
Okay. Yeah, it's I've been in a state investigator now for about 28 years, and I've worked internal affairs, and I deal with employees who've taken bribes and so forth. And it starts like that. It starts with a friend or a family member as a favor, and it's that simple, just one time. But as you could see on your case, then they bring someone else, and then it's, you know, you're somehow caught up in this thing. It's something to caution you for the future, regardless of family member or close friends. It just starts that innocently, and it can develop something, you know, that could really ruin your life.
Yeah, I've learned that you can't trust anybody, and you always have to keep your guard up and your wall up, and every business stays in the pharmacy.
Done a great job. I'm seeing everything that you've put forward to better yourself and prove that you're a pharmacist, and I commend you on that. Thank you very much for coming again.
Thank you.
Ms. Field? So I, too, was one of the people that was at the prior. And as I recall, when your case came up, I believe you did not come to the table. You were in the audience, and we didn't know who you were.
Correct. I was a blubbering, insecure mess.
Well, I think we figured out who you were because there was the girl that was in the audience crying a lot. So I appreciate that you now have, you know, gotten yourself together and you can be in front of us, because I do feel like at that point we felt like you just were, didn't have enough self-confidence to say no. So when you look back at Mr. DeSerna, do you see red flags?
All over the place.
And what are they?
Just the fact that his whole demeanor perked up when he found out I was a pharmacist, that he was complaining of pain from an accident where I couldn't physically see any injuries, and the fact that it was a dirty prescription written with high amounts of controlled substances and of the typical ones that are, you know, noted in like opioid and all the different CEs that I've read, and like the oxycodone, Xanax, Norcos, and they're all on one pad, and it's by, he lives in La Habra, the doctor's in San Clemente, and the fact that he's brought multiple people with this similar prescriptions, and you know, and just
At what point did you realize that you'd made a mistake?
yeah, I think I realized it literally after when he brought a second one that looked exactly the same, and then even confirmed even more so when he brought a second person with the same.
And I guess kind of what Mr. Law was talking about, the just kind of a tip, you know, sometimes when they have forged pads, you go put them in the computer and you realize the phone numbers are different. So sometimes you don't have to dig real deep to find out that there's a problem. Let's see, I think I have one of the, oh, and when I was looking at your CE, it looked like a lot of it was maybe online. It looked like you did some face-to-face, but most of it was kind of magazines and online. And in your application, you said that you were hoping to go and become a compounding community pharmacist, but then I thought you were also talking that you're interested in MTM and patient safety. So what is your hopes if you get your license back?
When I submitted the petition, this was before I got my new job, and I was set on hoping to go back into compounding, which I would be happy with either one. I loved compounding. I loved being able to interact with the patients on a more, on a deeper level than just the retail pharmacy, and helping with, you know, optimal dosing, and the autistic community. I really appreciate the being able to help them. But with this new job that I have now, and it's something that I had always had in the back of my head that I was interested in, and I was just realizing it, and I just started this job a few weeks ago, and so just a new brainstorm starting to form of being able, I've always been an advocate of de-prescribing and optimizing medications and treatments, and learning that my CEO has the same goals and missions with his residents at the nursing home facilities. It's kind of something that it's just an idea that we've realized we have in common, and in the coming months we would be interested in working together to do something with that. And so with a license to practice, I would have more ability to feel like be more useful with what I'm able to do to help him make that happen.
So you think if you got your license back, you'd actually maybe within your current employer be able to implement some programs?
Yeah, yes. And then, because without the active license, I'm limited on what I'm able to do, including consultations. And so with the license, I would feel like I would have more ability to build a program and grow a more successful program than just banter back and forth, and I'm not able to do anything myself.
And so I just kind of want to follow up on a couple questions. Mr. Weiser talked about the rotation. So in none of the rotations did you have any situations, and your community rotation, I guess specifically, that that they talked about controlled drugs or maybe having to deal with patients that have issues?
None of the rotations I had exposed me to it. The community rotation that I was at a CVS, and it was a high volume store where you're just cranking out medications. So it was hard to take the time to do that.
Okay, and I think you made the comment that even with corporate or expectations to do high volume, that in the future you wouldn't let that guide you, but that did perhaps influence you in the past?
Correct, yeah. And I still tell my friends to this day that, my pharmacist friends to this day, where I tell them, I do remind them, just slow down and make sure that, I know you're doing 300 prescriptions a day and you need to do it in 2.3 seconds, but take the time, get in trouble with corporate, it's not worth it.
And then Dr. Gutierrez mentioned, talking to the students at pharmacy school. So it's been 6 years. I didn't quite understand. Have you not done that yet? You're hoping to do it in the future?
I haven't done it yet. I'm hoping to do it in the future. I'm hoping it's easier for me to speak to them with a reinstated license, so that I can say, hey, I got it back, but I got lucky, and they're giving me a second chance. Not everybody gets that, and I feel like it would be more impactful for them than for me with just somebody, a schmuck without a license, talking to them.
Okay, well, like the others, thank you for coming, and once again, thank you for being in front of us and talking to us. Appreciate that.
Ms. Tarr, I just want to confirm what your current employment is. That with Rockport, you said?
Correct.
Okay. And you're employed with the CEO, Dr. Wasserman, is that right?
Correct.
All right, very good. All right, Ms. Jarvis, any final thoughts for us today?
I have no recommendation for the board. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Petrzalka, any final comments today?
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I just wanted to, again, thank the board for your patience and for your willingness to listen to our presentation, and also to bring forth the fact that the individual who stands humbly before you today is not the same individual who allowed her judgment to lapse in such a terrible way 6 years ago. As you could see, Dr. Tarr had matured both professionally and personally, and she put forth a very strong rehabilitation effort. And we strongly believe that reinstatement of her license at this point is in the public interest. Thank you again for your attention.
Thank you very much. All right. Do you want to take a break?
Let's take a 5-minute break before we move on to the next case.
All right.
All right, we're back in session. Your Honor.
I just want to make one housekeeping measure. In the TAR matter, I neglected to ask if there was any objection to the moving of the 3 exhibits. So Ms. Jarvis had me mark Exhibits 1 and 2, and on behalf of Ms. Tar, we marked Exhibit 3. Ms. Jarvis, any objection to 3?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Petrozelka, any objection to 1 or 2?
No, Your Honor.
All right, very good. All 3 having been moved in, I'll excuse you, Mr. Petrozelka. Thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, we're going to move on to the next case. That is actually the first case listed on the agenda for the petitions, and I'm going to try to do this. It's Mr. Bagdatia. Okay, I'm close. Mr. Bagdatia. It is Office of Administrative Hearings, case number 2018-051199. And Ms. Jarvis, you've already handed out a 2-page document. Should I hold on marking this before we mark the other 2 exhibits?
Yes, let's wait until petitioner actually testifies and tells us what these are.
All right.
I just handed them out for ease of.
All right, so I'm not going to have the board members introduce themselves again, since we've all been here and we've been listening to all of this. So Ms. Jarvis has already identified herself for the record, and so I'll just have you state your name.
Arutun Bagdatian.
Okay, Mr. Bagdatian, thank you for coming today. I'm going to swear you in right away so that we don't forget to do that. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes.
Okay, very good. We'll procedurally go the same way. So Ms. Jarvis, I'll open the floor to you first, please, for a summary of the case.
Thank you, Your Honor. In 2007, respondent was convicted on his plea of no contest for grand theft of credit cards, a felony. He was employed at a toy store and stole, or it's known as skimmed, 17 customer credit cards. He then sold these skimmed cards for $50 each, and the person to whom he sold them made approximately $20,000 worth of fraudulent charges. Respondent has paid that restitution in full through the criminal case and paid all of the fees and fines involved in that court case as well. In 2009, petitioner's criminal probation was terminated early, and then in 2010, petitioner's conviction was reduced to a misdemeanor and expunged pursuant to Penal Code Section 1203.4. Petitioner has no other criminal convictions. Petitioner first applied for a pharmacy technician license, in 2009, which was denied by the board. Petitioner appealed and proceeded to an administrative hearing and was again denied. Petitioner then applied for an intern pharmacist license in 2010, which was also denied by the board. It appears that he did not appeal that denial. Instead, he moved to Arkansas, which is where he obtained his pharmacy degree and obtained an intern pharmacist license there. For the instant case, petitioner applied for a pharmacist license in California on or about June 11th, 2013. That application was again denied. Petitioner appealed and proceeded to an administrative hearing where his license was granted, revoked, with the revocation stayed for a 5-year probationary period. The board adopted this decision effective March 20th, 2015. However, petitioner was unemployed for a while, and so this probation was tolled from June 11th, 2015 to March 11th, 2016. Petitioner's expected probation completion date is therefore March 11th of 2021. Petitioner has served 2 years and 2 months of his probation so far, and he has been 100% compliant with his probation terms. With the petition, petitioner submitted 30 hours of continuing education certificates, reaching from September of 2016 to August of 2017. Petitioner has provided 5 letters of recommendation, 4 of which were verified. Those letters include one from a pharmacy technician who is also the director of pharmacy operations where petitioner is employed. Another from a pharmacy technician is also a pharmacy manager and works with petitioner. There are 2 non-licensees who are both MDs who submitted the citizen letters. The final letter, which again was not verified, is from the president of one of the pharmacies where petitioner works, who states that he has seen petitioner perform good and valuable customer service and patient care. At this time, I would like to submit Exhibit 1, the petition for early termination with the attachments, and Exhibit 2, the stipulated settlement and disciplinary order in case number 5006. If I may approach.
Yes, please.
It is a pretty straightforward petition, which I hope the board has reviewed, and therefore it is now petitioner's opportunity to address the board.
All right. Mr. Bagdatian, this is your time to help the board understand what rehabilitation you've done. And to please remember that the board has reviewed your packet already, so if you're going to give a summary, make that brief and focused on rehabilitation.
Thank you. Dear members of the board, I thank you for considering my application for early termination. As Ms. Jarvis said, I have been a very persistent applicant with the board over the almost past 10 years. And this persistence shows the dedication that I'm willing to show and prove to my parents, family members, patients, loved ones, and to the board that the actions of an immature, foolish 21-year-old can be forgiven, and that I can prove to them that the person who committed those acts, that crime, is not the same person sitting before you today. I am now a mature 33-year-old, recently engaged, part-time pharmacist who is still living with his parents and is asking the board to consider reducing the remaining 2 almost 3 years of the probation. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Jarvis, any questions?
Yes, Your Honor. You have submitted 2 additional letters today that I believe you would like the board to consider.
Yes, please.
Okay, what are these letters?
It's just showing the board the interactions and the relationship that I had with Walgreens during my internship during pharmacy school, and when I worked as a clerk before going into pharmacy school at the Walgreens with the company, and also the offer that they had made me to be a staff pharmacist, which was later on denied after they went through human resources and saw that I had a background and my license was on probation. So I just want to show the board that there was an opportunity for me to serve the public, being a full-time pharmacist, which I was not able to go through with, and eventually I found employment, pieced together days at 2 to 3 different pharmacies, but I am looking forward to getting full-time employment.
So these letters, the first letter appears to be from a Deshawn, that's capital D-E, capital S-H-A-W-N, Robinson. Now this letter is dated February 4th of 2014. So that's well before you submitted your petition packet. Why didn't you submit this with your petition?
It's showing the relationship I had with the company and then the offer I had. It wasn't something recent. That's why I didn't include it. I just wanted to show the background of where I was coming from, all the years that I've spent trying to find employment, trying to get my license. Just a background, more of a.
The second letter is dated July 28th of 2015. That's the offer of employment you've been referring to?
Yes.
Okay. I have no other questions.
All right. In that case, Dr. Wong, any questions?
No, I have no question for now.
All right. Dr. Schott?
One of the things I was curious about is this letter from Deshawn Robinson. What does PD stand for?
Pharmacist, doctor, if I'm not mistaken, in Arkansas. I think their designation was a little bit different. I think she doesn't have a PharmD, but a doctor of pharmacy, I think that's what she was referring to. But she is a staff pharmacist at Walgreens.
Okay. That's it for me.
All right. Dr. Gutierrez?
Good morning. I had a question regarding the licensure, are you licensed in Arkansas? Did you ever seek licensure in Arkansas?
Yes, in Arkansas, I applied for my intern license, and went through, they denied me initially, and we went through the steps of getting the appeal, which they granted because they saw that I was in school. These events took place at that time, it was maybe around 4 or 5 years ago, and they did grant me the intern license and allowed me to do my rotation hours, at which time I also applied in California for my intern license to get that hopefully accepted, so I could have done a couple of rotations at home because I don't have any family members, nobody in Arkansas. I felt more comfortable here living at home. The expenses were less, but the board reasonably, they should have done it, and they did deny it because my actions were serious, and I breached the trust with the customers at KB Toys, and the board knows that trust is a very, very important factor because we have HIPAA, we have patient records, we have detailed confidential information, we have drug history, and all of that sensitive information is very important to protect, and that's why the board denied my intern license. At which time, if I appealed it, I was already going to be back here, so I didn't go through with the appeal because I was already coming back after graduating.
You didn't apply for a pharmacist license in Arkansas upon graduation?
No, I did not apply for pharmacist license.
Because you had intended to move here?
Yes, I wanted to come back home after school.
Thank you.
No questions.
All right, Dr. Loft?
Hi. So you did take the CPJE in California, so
Yes.
you got the license.
Yes.
Okay.
And
And
passed the first occasion on both NAPLEX and CPG.
so now that you're on probation, so how many days a week are you employed?
I'm employed currently 2.5 days. Saturdays is a half day, 2.5 days a week.
Okay. Now, I want to understand a little thing about the past action that you had. Was it something that you started with a bunch of friends, or is it something you were on your own?
I was at work. It was the work environment, and some people came and offered this enticing. I was very dumb. Looking back, nothing is worth any ounce of any money. Anything is worth the trust that you have with patients or customers. I breached that. I got enticed. I was at school at USC, and I thought this sounds, I don't know, extra money, but looking back, biggest mistake of my life, and I hope I could prove the board that they could see that it's in my past and I'm not the same person.
And you don't associate with those people anymore?
Absolutely not.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Weiser?
I have no questions, but thank you for coming here.
Mr. Sanchez?
Yeah, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Ms. Field?
I would agree, you are probably the most persistent applicant. So, kudos for that. So what you're asking for is you accepted having 5 years of probation, and you would like and you're just a little over 2 years, and so you would like for us to remove the almost 3 years that's left.
Yes, the total amount was due to the fact that nobody was willing to hire me. I had trouble. I had employment offer from Walgreens in July, so I wouldn't have been told, but that factor played a very very big obstacle for me. And yes, I would please ask the board if they would consider removing that restriction so I could have more easier search and to get a minimum of at least full-time employment.
And you're referring to the July 2015 offer, not July, like a year ago?
Yes,
So, okay.
July.
And so, it looks like you're working in quite a few pharmacies here. So Grace, Graywell, Pico Union, and Normandy, it appears that by your letter, that you're still working in all 4 of those pharmacies?
I'm current there, but as of right now, the other 2 pharmacies, I only go in for coverage when the pharmacist in charge takes a vacation or they call in sick. But stably, I'm working only at two of the pharmacies currently.
Which 2 are you working at?
At the Pico Union and Normandy Pharmacy.
Okay, and
The
then
last-
Grace and Graywell, you're just, when they need you, they
When
call
they need
you?
me, they call me, yes.
And you think if you're off of probation, will one of these 4 pharmacies give you full-time?
Yes, I do believe so, as my recommendation letter from Normandy Pharmacy stated. The technician Artyom, he was around 20 years working there, and the pharmacist in charge is Stan Greenberg. I think he just celebrated his 50th anniversary of being a pharmacist, and they're looking forward for me to eventually fill his shoes and be their pharmacist in charge if the board would consider reducing my probation.
So they'll hire you full-time because they need a pharmacist in charge, and that's why you're not full-time now?
No, Dr. Greenberg is working, Stan Greenberg is working the 4 days. I'm only covering his Fridays off. I'm helping out with his day off.
Okay. I guess I'm just trying to connect the dots. I'm not trying to ask you tricky
Yeah,
questions.
it's a lot of.
Yeah, a lot of reading.
Pharmacies
So
and hours.
you want full-time, and you can't get it right now.
No.
But if we took away the probation, then you could get it, because then you could become the PIC?
I could get, not the PIC issue is not that important, but getting full-time employment, having more opportunities, having more pharmacies look at my probation and not take that into a factor, it would be an easier transition for full-time.
Okay, so you don't really have a full-time job, it's just that from talking to everybody, it'll be easier for you to get a full-time job?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much.
All right, I just want to get a few clarifications following on Ms. Veal's questions. The 2 pharmacies that you currently just provide coverage for, you indicated one was the Graywell Pharmacy, is that right?
Yes.
And what is the other pharmacy you provide coverage?
Grace Pharmacy.
And then the Pico Union and Normandy pharmacies are the ones that you work 1 day a week at each pharmacy?
1 day at Normandy, 1.5 at Pico Union.
And again, just for clarification, following up on Ms. Veal's question, have you spoken to anyone at any one of these 4 pharmacies about obtaining full-time employment from them if your probation, you were no longer on probation?
They all have very. They all like the work I provide them. They're very appreciative of the efforts, my work effort, and if given the opportunity, if the opening came up, I would be the first person they would hire in all 4 pharmacies.
All right. Do you know if you've had those conversations with any of them, would they be offering you a full-time position even if you were to remain on probation as soon as a full-time position was available?
They wouldn't be able to because my restrictions don't allow for me to be a PIC, and they would have to maintain a PIC. I could only be a staff pharmacist, so they wouldn't be able.
All right, thank you. All right. In that case, Ms. Jarvis, any follow-up questions?
Yes, Your Honor. Have you ever been a PIC in any pharmacy?
No.
Do you feel that your first job stepping off probation would be appropriate for you to be a pharmacist in charge?
No.
Okay. So it would be your intent to be a full-time staff pharmacist somewhere?
Yes, in the beginning, I would prefer to be a staff pharmacist.
Have you looked for full-time employment while you were on probation?
Every day, every day.
I have no other questions.
All right. Mr. Bagdatian, any other comments that you'd like to share with the board?
I want to thank the board again for the time they gave me today. I appreciate you considering my application. I would very much appreciate be given the chance to show the board and prove to everybody in my surroundings that I've been rehabilitated and I could prove them that I'm a trustworthy and dedicated healthcare provider. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Bagdatian, I've marked the 2 letters related to Walgreens that you've just testified to as Exhibit 3. I've also marked the petition packet as Exhibit 1 and the decision of the board as Exhibit 2. Do you have any objection to me admitting Exhibits 1 and 2?
No.
Ms. Jarvis, any objection to me admitting Exhibit 3?
No, Your Honor.
All right. 1, 2, and 3 are all admitted. His date of birth. All right. In that case, we'll take everything under submission, and we thank you for your time.
Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, please.
I do have some final thoughts for the board in this case.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. Petitioner's conviction here is troubling, as it shows a lack of morality and good conduct. Theft, and particularly this type of theft, would be very easy for a pharmacist who has significant access to confidential consumer information and controlled substances. I think these arguments are obvious and are the reasons, most likely, the board in 3 previous cases has rejected this petitioner's application for licensure. However, this conviction is 11 years old. It has been expunged pursuant to the penal code. He has shown no further criminal conduct in 11 years. There have been no additional criminal convictions. He does appear remorseful here today, and the restitution that he made in his criminal case far exceeded the amount that he made for his crimes. So I ask the board to keep all of these factors into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Christina, thank you very much for that.
All right. On that note, that we'll close the record as to this hearing. Mr. Bagdatian, you may stay present or you may leave. That's on you. Okay? All right. Thank you. All right, so we do have one board member who is excusing herself now. We're going to begin our next petition. Mr. Jinesh Patel.
Pete. Okay.
All right, very good. All right, so we're now working on our third petition. We have had Dr. Gutierrez step away. She has a phone call she needs to attend to, but we still have a quorum, so we're all right. And we're going to begin with Mr. Janesh Patel's petition. This is case 2018-051-203. Ms. Jarvis, I'll open the floor to you for a summary of this case, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. On March 7th, 2007, petitioner was issued his pharmacist license. In 2009, petitioner perpetrated his first driving under the influence, or DUI. His blood alcohol level on this first offense was a 0.19%. The board at that time issued a citation with a $1,000 fine. In 2013, petitioner was convicted of his second DUI, which occurred in August of 2012. Petitioner's blood alcohol level for the second DUI was a 0.22%. He also stated that he had taken Zolpidem, a sleep medication that is dangerous to mix with alcohol. Due to the second DUI, with of course the aggravating factor of the first, the board filed an accusation against petitioner, which was resolved via stipulated settlement for a 5-year probation term. That settlement was adopted by the board effective September 16th, 2014. Petitioner has therefore completed approximately 3.5 years of his probation term, and he has been 100% compliant. The stipulated settlement required petitioner to go through the Pharmacist Recovery Program, the PRP, to be suspended from practice for 120 days, to complete an ethics course, and complete 48 hours of community service. It should be noted that petitioner actually entered PRP immediately after the DUI, which was well prior to it being ordered as a term of probation. In support of his petition, petitioner provided the following information: continuing education certificates totaling 83.75 hours starting before he was placed on probation in April of 2016 through April of 2018. He has provided 6 letters of recommendation, 4 of which were verified: 2 licensed pharmacists and 2 citizens, 1 a physical therapist assistant, and the other a marriage and family therapist with a master's in public health and a doctorate in psychology. The other 2 unverified letters are from a member of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, who is friends with petitioner, and another pharmacist who has known petitioner for more than 12 years. All of the letters provided are, of course, exemplary, but in particular, each reference petitioner's DUIs, both of them, as well as his probation through this board and his recovery journey. Petitioners provided performance reviews for 2015 and 2016, which showed exceeding expectations, as well as peer-to-peer reviews for 2016 and 17, which rate his performance highly. Petitioners provided information about a case study that he is currently working on at MedImpact, that's MEDIMPACT, his current employer, in regards to managing opioid overutilization challenges. And finally, petitioner provided a list of personal vulnerabilities and risk factors that he has identified and developed through the Professional Boundaries Medical Ethics course. He also provided his personal code of ethics and his personal relapse prevention plan. It should be noted that petitioner's written statements in this matter were excessively thorough. I believe it was 31 pages. I am not going to summarize all this. I presume the board has read his life story that was provided. But I will note that petitioner appears to be very engaged in his pursuit of recovery from alcoholism. At this time, I'd like to submit Exhibit 1 as the petition for early termination of probation with the attachments provided, and Exhibit 2 as the stipulated settlement and disciplinary order in case number 4752.
All right, very good. All right, I will mark each of these, Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2. I'll also note for the record that when speaking with all of the petitioners prior to the hearing today, I asked each of the petitioners if they had any additional documents that they wanted to offer the board, and we will be getting additional documents from those petitioners if they had them to give today. All right, so with Exhibit 1 and 2, with that, Ms. Jarvis, I'll turn to the petitioner. Yes?
Yes, it is now his opportunity to address the board.
All right, very good. Mr. Patel, I'll have you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. And you probably noticed you have to get very close to that microphone.
Is that better?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So now again is your opportunity to share with the board. If it's a summary, it should be brief, and anything that focusing on rehabilitation, all right?
Thank you very much
All
for the
right, very
opportunity.
good. The floor is yours.
I'll try to make it very brief compared to the packet that I sent in. First, if I want to thank the board, Your Honor, and Ms. Jarvis for allowing me to come today and present my packet or my petition for early termination and having this hearing. First off, I want to take full responsibility for my actions for my DUI arrest. I prepared a little bit of statement just to make sure I hit some notes, so I apologize if it looks like I'm reading, but I alone made the decision to drink and drive those nights, and in doing so, I completely recognize that I placed the public in harm's way. Although there was no property or personal damage, it does not escape my mind that there easily could have been. I could have seriously injured somebody or even killed somebody. Whenever I hear a news story about a DUI crash, I'm so grateful that my poor judgments those nights did not result in the same outcomes as those stories or articles I read. I pray every day for those involved in those news stories, and there is no shortage of news stories like that every day. So there is no greater constant reminder for me of what could have happened to me, and I still get goosebumps even on the few remaining hairs that I have on my head every time I hear a story like that. Nothing else gives you different eyes for what's important and what really matters, and I am truly, truly sorry for my actions. With this opening statement and just highlighting a few things that I didn't include in my petition packet, I realize it was quite long, and thank you for taking the time to read it through. I just wanted to show you or convey to you that I'm a completely different person today, both in my thinking and my actions than I was 6 years ago. And that's all through entering recovery and through my rehabilitative efforts. My life before and after, since being in recovery, is like night and day for me, and my family and my friends that know me, I think, would echo that sentiment as well. In order to portray this delineation to you, I used a template just to highlight a few things, a template that was provided by the Maximus Diversion Program to hit a couple points of how my drinking and poor decision-making affected aspects of my life before recovery. And then also to show you how I conduct myself now and the actions I have taken to prevent this from ever happening again. So legal. My journey into recovery began after being released from the downtown jail, as Ms. Jarvis said, for my DUI arrest in August of 2012. I remember laying on the floor of the jail cell with a makeshift jacket, my pillow, thinking in my head, how did I let this happen again? And I couldn't figure it out. And I remember sitting in the back of that police car with the handcuffs on my wrist, thinking to myself, this has to be a nightmare, and I'm going to wake up from this again. I'm going to wake up from this, and this is all going to go away. And when I realized it wasn't a nightmare, I just had this utter feeling of misery. And we refer to this in AA as incomprehensible demoralization. And it's such an apropos term. After being released from jail, I knew I had to change my ways. My old way of thinking wasn't going to work anymore, and that's why I went on the board's website and found the PRP and called the PRP and voluntarily set up a case with the case manager, an appointment. I did the intake, and then she recommended that I go to 90 days inpatient treatment at Promises, so I followed suit with that. I took direction and admitted myself to the 90-day inpatient treatment. In terms of being honest, as step one in the AA program refers to, my life had become unmanageable. I thought I could drink after my first DUI responsibly. I couldn't. I got another DUI. There was no reason for me to be able to drink and drive. In AA, step one refers to my life had become unmanageable. I went to the board's, sorry, I'm trying to make it a little bit faster because I know there's a lot of stuff, but I did
Take your time so that it's all clear.
Okay, good, sorry. So I did voluntarily call Maximus after my arrest, and I checked myself into the 90-day treatment program. As Ms. Jarvis pointed out, this was all done before the board had even opened an investigation into my arrest. and it was a full 2 years before the stipulated settlement requiring that I enter a diversion program. It's no coincidence that the step one spiritual principle of virtue happens to be honesty. When I'm being honest, I have no reason not to follow the laws, both criminally and professionally. There is no wiggle room, period. In taking and completing the ethics course, it further cemented the understanding that regardless of my risk factors, environmental or emotional influences, laws have purposely been put in place to help to protect the public. If I was being honest with myself that night, I would have never driven. There was absolutely no circumstance, no reason, big or small, for me to get behind the wheel of my vehicle while impaired. I truly regret that I committed the unlawful and dangerous acts. Now I'm honest in all my affairs, and I can remain confident that all my actions will be law-abiding and not placing the public at risk for greater harm. After I completed the 90-day inpatient treatment program, I went into Maximus and started completing all the requirements that they had laid out before me, and included in my petition packet, including twice weekly health support group meetings, daily AA meetings, attending an outpatient aftercare program at Scripps Hospital McDonald Center for Drug and Alcohol Treatment, and random alcohol and drug testing. I did all this without a driver's license. Due to the second DUI, they had suspended my license. So oftentimes, I took the bus, rode a bike, or walked, many times taking the 2-hour each-way trip to attend a health support group meeting or an AA meeting. Most of the time, it was waking up at 5 in the morning, taking the bus for about 90 minutes, and then having to walk the other 30 minutes to get to the health support group meeting. For the clinical evaluation, Maximus selected a psychologist in Orange County, which is about 90 minutes north of San Diego. Instead of pushing back, I took direction. Like my sponsor likes to say early on when you come into recovery, you take direction no matter what it is. More aptly put, you take the cotton out of your ears and you put it in your mouth, and you do what's asked of you. And so I did that. I took public transportation up to Lake Forest, which was 7 hours each way, the train, the bus, and walking to make sure I get evaluated. I was sentenced in March 2013 for my misdemeanor, and by the grace of my higher power, the judge credited me time served in the rehab treatment in place of jail time. I was also required to do a bunch of DUI classes, an 18-month DUI course, a Mothers Against Drunk Driving class, court fines, installation of an interlock ignition device, and 5-year summary probation. I completed all of those in the minimum amount of time to take, oftentimes attending those by taking public transportation, just to show. In September 2014, I received my stipulated settlement from the board, and I began my pharmacy probation. In February 2015, I completed 2 years of the outpatient treatment program at the Scripps McDonald's Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center, San Diego. I was only required to complete 1 year, but I stayed on an additional year as the facilitator, and also to help with the newcomers that come into the group to talk about recovery, and also to share my experience, strength, and hope. In early August 2017, 5 years after I voluntarily enrolled into Maximus, I completed the Maximus diversion program. Later that month, I petitioned for and was granted early termination of summary probation for my DUI misdemeanor by the court, with the presiding judge referencing my rehabilitative efforts, strong program of recovery, and large number of negative random drug alcohol screenings. No longer on summary probation, I was able to file for an expungement of my misdemeanors. I have filed these expungements not to hide or deny my past, but to make it easier to find future employment. Having a criminal record, especially in our profession, severely dampens our ability to find employment. Secondary only to not having a clean pharmacy license, which we see a lot now on all the job application websites. Having a criminal record closes any potential doors that may have opened for a job. The court approved my motion for an expungement of my first misdemeanor in late December of 2017. It was after I submitted my petition, so that's why it's not included in the packet. And I have that to provide to the board as evidence also. We also had submitted for the expungement of the second DUI, but unfortunately due to a clerical mistake, the perjury statement was not added in that declaration, so it was denied. I'm working with the Public Defender's Office, and we have refiled that motion. That was filed on May 30th, 2018. As of today, I'm currently only on board probation. Taking into account the time from when I voluntarily enrolled into Maximus back in August 2012, a full 2 years prior to my board stipulated settlement, September 24. I've completed 5 years or almost 6 years, with 5 years, about 9 months of supervised probationary monitoring. I'm hoping the board takes that into consideration with my petition for early termination. In terms of vocationally, when I entered pharmacy school, my goal was to open a compounding pharmacy, I think like most other first-year students that enter pharmacy school. I wanted to help patients by providing tailored pharmaceutical care, whether that be via personalized consultative services or alternative dosage form creation. During my pharmacy school rotations, however, I began to develop an interest for managed care. Managed care pharmacy and formulary administration. The pool to impact the population of patients was greater than at the individual patient level for me. I was able to secure a general practice residency at a federal hospital in San Diego to further my clinical education. I followed that up with a second-year specialized residency in pharmacoeconomics and formulary management at the same hospital. The hard work paid off, and I was able to get a job at another hospital health plan in San Diego as a formulary management pharmacist. I enjoyed the job and the people that I enjoyed the job and loved the people that I worked with there. I developed a passion for developing and implementing clinical programs to help influence prescribing, which in turn leads to a greater public impact. I worked hand in hand with chiefs of medical staffs, medical directors on initiatives to help curb the over or inappropriate prescribing of controlled substances. And we were getting started on these programs back in 2010 before the crisis that we see involved now. And we made great strides back then, really using utilization management tools and harnessing the technology that we had at the time to help with inappropriate prescribing or overprescribing and notifying physicians. While I was working at the health plan or at the hospital at that time, at night I was working as a clinical pharmacist at the hospital. I did my residency, and really, when I look back at it now, my time there was really to save money to help this relationship that I was in that was unhealthy. I realize now that I was trying to save money so I could help support my ex-girlfriend at the time in the future if we were to have kids. But I realize now that that wasn't a good relationship. I turned into working more at the hospital just to stay away from home. It wasn't a good thing. Before it was, really to gain the clinical knowledge, get the money. Now it was more just trying to stay away out of the relationship so I didn't upset the person. And I could see that now working with a therapist and through my recovery. Eventually we broke up, and I think I had poor coping mechanisms. I turned to alcohol instead of talking to a therapist, talking to my family, talking to my friends, talking to anybody. And that's really the crux of where I am right before recovery. In July 2014, I resigned my position to look for other opportunities. During this time between jobs, while I was unemployed, I was arrested for my DUI and subsequently started down my path to recovery. Nothing is more humbling than being a promising pharmacist who once had many opportunities and doors open in a career path to not being able to find employment in the profession I love. While in Maximus, there are worksite restrictions that many potential employers are not willing to take on. In my case, it was all potential employers I interviewed with. After having positive interviews with hiring managers, and despite the fact that my participation in the program diversion was not due to criminal substance diversion, I always got a follow-up call that human resources is not willing to burden the paperwork, the worksite supervision, or even just the overall risk. Nevermore have I felt the ability to work as a pharmacist as a privilege, not a right. It does not matter how long you went to school for, how many residencies you completed, how many board certifications you get, how successful you have been in your pharmacy setting, and for however long. There is no resting on our professional laurels. There is no entitlement to practicing pharmacy. The board and our profession doesn't own us anything, especially in my case when I broke the law. Again, the ethics course was a valuable resource to me. It helped me understand this principle, and this is what the ethics course, I think the main question was, how someone that is so morally and ethically committed and law-abiding in all their actions can yet still make an unethical, immoral, or unlawful act in another moment. This course helped me to understand my vulnerabilities and risk factors and provided a user's manual on the tools and principles to protect myself, patients, and the public, now and in the future. Going back to some of the other petitioners' hearings, what we just heard about the medical ethics course and whether or not, whether that should be added to the curriculum in the pharmacy schools to kind of open up the eyes of these pharmacy students, I absolutely agree with that. You know, I think that as pharmacists coming out, you know, just young professionals, we're not aware of all the dangers that we're putting ourselves in. And I don't think it's a pharmacy school problem that they don't teach it. I think that we should just have to be more open to the idea of providing an ethics course. I know at the school that I attended, we touched on things like this, like the pharmacy law and what are the consequences of that. But I think having people such as myself or somebody else come in there that have firsthand experience of going through this system is very valuable. Just as much as valuable as we have is going through rotations as pharmacy students as well. So. Gratitude is a word that gets thrown around a lot in recovery, and I wish I could fully convey the gratitude I feel just being able to work as a pharmacist. I'm a much better pharmacist now than I ever was. I have more empathy, sympathy, and confidence in the way I deal with not only patients, but my coworkers and clients. Every day I wake up thanking my higher power I'm able to work as a pharmacist. Part of my nightly Step 10 daily inventory review includes whether I was not only a better person, but a better pharmacist today than the previous day. And if not, what I can do the next day to correct it, whether that's being more attentive in a meeting or doing a task that is normally not my responsibility or giving somebody the extra 5 or 10 minutes that they need. I try to carry that gratitude through my actions. Some things that have changed since I submitted my petition in terms of my work. The company I work for has recently taken a different view on my probationary status. My probationary status of my pharmacy license and my employment there. They have removed me from my clinical position, which I had been in for over a year, even though they knew about my pharmacy probation license, the status of it. They said previously where I was working directly with clients, helping them manage their formularies and build these clinical programs and tools, they said that I was placing the company at risk because of my probationary status. They have moved me into an operational type of role behind the scenes. They placed a letter in my HR file which prevents career advancements and limits my annual performance reviews to average, even though I scored exceeds expectations on individual components. The two that I submitted with the petition were before this change, and this is what's happened since. The previous director I reported to, who left the company amid some of these actions taken against me, told me what the company is doing is not fair since really there was no impotence that I posed a risk. I was working in this position for more than a year and there's never been complaints. And one of the annual performance reviews that I submitted was in my role in that position. If the board granted me early termination of probation, I will be able to go back to my company and show them that I have had the probationary status removed. Or in the event they decide to end my at-will employment, which multiple people who have knowledge of my situation have said, it is very likely that that's probably going to happen. It will provide me the opportunity to find another job and continue working as a pharmacist. As I mentioned earlier, I love developing clinical programs to help influence inappropriate prescribing of medications. We've created an opioid work group at our company, and I'm part of that work group as well, where we try to come up with new ideas to help our plans and health plans with this opioid crisis that we have. I also help out with a high-cost medications work group as well, where we use advanced analytics to find these prescriptions that may not be normal, such as compounding pharmacies that are submitting claims that are egregious compared to what they should be getting. So, yeah.
I'm going to jump in for just a second and ask if you can highlight for us in this presentation things that are not included in your packet.
Sure.
I'll give you a second to sort of collect those things out of the document you have in front of you.
Sure. Thank you, Your Honor. In terms of financially, I'm starting to make a recovery. I had to take a lot of loans out when I was not working and in Maximus. I'm starting to pay back the loan that my parents provided me to help me continue in Maximus with all the drug testing that's involved in all the fees. And I'm starting to slowly repay my student loans and pay back the back rent that I owed my roommates. Emotionally, I'm a completely different person today than I was 6 years ago. I think 6 years ago I was emotionally liable. I think now I've found emotional balance, having worked the steps multiple times, as well as being in therapy. I use a lot of yoga and meditation to help find that balance. and I have more healthy coping mechanisms. I talk to family members, I talk to friends, I talk to fellow AA brothers, and I talk to anybody that'll basically listen. I'm no longer stuffing these feelings and no longer turning to alcohol to cope. In terms of spirituality, I just want to iterate that I've had a spiritual awakening, which the big book of AA talks about. I realize now that I don't have to control the world. I have a higher power in my life now that helps me with this. I still attend 2 to 3 AA meetings a week. I have a home group on Saturdays that I go to every week where I served as secretary and treasurer. And I've become more of a yes man in terms of who I am. Yes, I'll lead a meeting when asked. Yes, I'll take people to a meeting. Yes, I'll help donate money and time to where I need to. And then finally, with marital and family, I've just become a better person than I was before. I spent the first 32 years of my life doing what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do, and how I wanted to do it, and I realized I was wrong in that mentality. I've become a better brother, son, and uncle since I've been in recovery, and I continue to plan to do so. As a living amends, I practice patience and kindness with my family because they did the same for me. And that's it. Sorry.
Very good. No need to apologize. I know that the board has taken their time, as have Ms. Jarvis and myself, to read carefully through, and so we want to understand from your perspective what those highlights are to look at. Ms. Jarvis, do you have questions for Mr. Patel?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. And this is just a yes or no question, just one word.
Ms. Jarvis, I just wagged my finger at Mr. Patel.
Do you consider yourself an alcoholic?
Yes.
Okay. What would lead you, this is not a yes or no question, what would lead you to drink in the future?
If I'd stop doing the things that are required of me in recovery, stop going to meetings, stop talking to my sponsor, stop talking to other members in the community, that's the first sign that I would lead to drinking.
What have you used in your life to replace what drinking previously gave you?
I think my friends that knew me from back then would say I was a little overweight. So I've turned to exercise to help me out. So I do healthy, active living. I do yoga as well and meditation. And then I'm just more communicative in terms of the problems that got me to drinking were poor coping mechanisms and relationship issues. And so being emotionally more stable, I'm able to reach out to friends and families when I'm feeling a little bit irritated or depressed.
Now, I think this was probably just a mistake or a slip of the tongue, but I thought you said in your statement that you were arrested in 2014 for your DUI. You were arrested in 2012.
I'm sorry.
And so what is your sobriety date?
My sobriety date is September 22nd, 2012.
Okay, thank you. No other questions.
All right, we're going to change things up. Ms. Veal, how about questions?
So you get the award today for the most complete packet.
I tried to be very thorough.
And thorough you were, so that was very nice. I feel like you presented your case very well in your packet, and congratulations on your sobriety date and keeping it for almost 6 years now.
Thank you very much.
No other questions.
All right, Mr. Sanchez?
Yeah, I just wanted to compliment you also for following through and going through the whole recovery process. I'm an individual that does believe in second chances, and definitely done your part. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez.
Mr. Weiser?
I read all 31 pages of your response.
I hope it didn't put you to sleep.
And I'm not sure, I think I'd rather make a statement than ask a question, but I think that there's some information in your response that this board and the staff ought to give a second thought to. And I'm referring to page 12 of 31, where you talk about Maximus, and where you talk about which costs roughly $75,000, and then $1,200 a month in drug and alcohol testing. And you go on to say that you searched for multiple jobs on Glassdoor, Monster, Career Building, Craigslist, et cetera. And finally, Maximus gave you the opportunity to seek out a job. Vibrant Health and Scan you talk about. But then you say, they did not feel I was worth the burden that Maximus program is asking of the company, or that I would be putting the company at additional risk for compliance or scrutiny. And I think that all of these things are very, very important. On page 14 of 31, you talk about something that really just struck me. And it struck me about an outfit that we are contracting with to deal with professionals, pharmacists who are in recovery and who are in need. And let me read this paragraph rather than have you read it. By this time, I was almost out of money as the cost of Maximus drug testing and health support group fees, in addition to the $75,000 out-of-pocket expense to attend Promises, had completely wiped out my life savings. I remember calling my Maximus case manager and telling her I would not have enough money for rent next month, nor to drug testing, and she said to sell my car and move back home with my parents. The alternative she presented was to forfeit my pharmacy license if I was not able to stick with the Maximus requirement. I humbly took a loan from my parents, you say. To continue on about Maximus, there's this med impact, and about a week later, the HR person called to tell me I got the job, and don't worry about the Maximus requirements. She will be my work site monitor. Apparently, she had been lobbying for me with the senior vice president of health services at the company the last few months. Anyway, so you gave your notice at Medicine Care Pharmacy. However, in your next paragraph, you say, despite working 40 hours per month at Med Impact, I was informed by Maximus in September that I needed to continue to work in an access position within a pharmacy to toll my hours with Maximus. I did not completely understand this requirement from Maximus as what led me to my probationary status involved my prior DUIs. There's a thread here about Maximus that causes thought, at least. And I want to, what you have presented to us is voluminous, and as Debbie mentioned, you are to be commended for the completeness of this. But you've also presented to me a thread of concern about the organization that you were required to use as a condition of your probation that is set forth by this board. So I thank you for pointing that out to me. And I have no further comments.
Mr. Law, any questions?
Thank you. Well, Stan, you said it very well. I think we should take that matter into the enforcement committee to take a look at it. So, Alan, you got something to do.
Definitely.
My only question for you is, I understand how tough it is for you to go through all this, since you had 2 strikes of two DUI, and really certainly don't want to see a 3rd one coming up. Now, tell me, at what point on the curriculum for the students, per se, you think this kind of DUI thing should be taught in school, or should you think that they should learn that from their APPE rotations?
From a personal experience, I think it should be taught in school, along with the pharmacy law portion. I think it goes hand in hand. I think that obviously pharmacy law plays a bigger role in the lives of these pharmacists, but I think there's this outside component that's missing as well. We follow the laws, at least in my case, we follow the laws in the pharmacy professionally, but there's this other side of things that could happen. You could easily slip into diversion, and you don't know what the consequences are of that. I also think that I was ignorant when I got my first DUI. I didn't understand how a DUI impacted my pharmacy profession, because I thought the 2 things were completely separate. I had my professional and then personal, but I think sometimes we don't know that is actually intertwined. What we do out there as not a pharmacist impacts who we are as a pharmacist as well. So I agree that I think that this should be taught in the curriculum as well. I don't know if there's an APP. I don't know where we would place that in an APP rotation. I don't know if you know, would it fit in a inpatient clinical hospital setting? Would it fit when you're doing rotations through retail? Where does that actually come into play? So I would think that it would lean more towards the curriculum that you actually get in the school.
So if you think that you could have heard that in class, that all of this couldn't have happened to you?
I'm responsible for my own actions, I believe, but I think it would have at least triggered something in my head to say, you know, this is something that could easily happen to you. I mean, I saw all the commercials on TV when I was in pharmacy school as a pharmacy student about the DUI, and it can affect your career, and, you know, it can cost $10,000 and everything that you see, you know, with Larry H. Parker or whoever it is on TV. I just completely, for some reason at that time when I was a student, I just didn't think it would affect me, and it didn't affect my professional license. So me even going in there and giving my stories, you know, when I have a pharmacy student that comes by, or we have a residency, we started up a new residency program at our PBM. You know, I talk to them about this stuff. I tell them that, you know, actions like these, it's not just something you see on the news. They can really have a large impact in what you can and can't do professionally, and it can stay with you forever. You know, I think that's the other thing that's missing with it.
And if the board grant you the early termination, would you be willing to send this message to the students in addition to come and testify in front of Alan's committee about all the things that happened during your course? Would you be willing to do that?
Absolutely. If it's okay if I have a counsel or somebody, 'cause sometimes as you can see from my documentation can get pretty long, so maybe they might be able to summarize things a little bit better. But
Thanks
yes.
a lot, Victor. Thanks a lot.
I create some work for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd be willing to share that. And I know I'm not the only one that's gone through some difficulties, so I'd be willing to speak.
Okay, thank you. No further question, Your Honor.
Mr. Lipa, any questions?
No questions, just congratulations on your recovery. And yeah, basically, I think what you're saying really is that maybe you didn't understand the importance of good judgment and how it affects, how bad judgment in other parts of your life affects your role as a pharmacist. And I think maybe that's the message that needs to get out there, that it's a judgment issue, period. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right,
Yeah.
Dr. Schott?
I don't want you at my committee, no offense. No, I'd like to compliment on your command of rhetoric. It's wonderful. I enjoyed your comments about pharmacoeconomics. I agree with the egregiousness of the situation. And I really appreciate your presentation. You covered all the bases, you know, in the presentation. You make me feel secure that you have a true sense of self. And so again, I compliment you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Shep.
Dr. Wong?
Since Judge, you reversed the order, they took all the thunder from me already. They asked most of the question for me. But I do have a couple comments. Victor and I, you know, like you guys say, we all think alike. So he asked all those questions already. Up to this point, I always think that DUI, as long as you're not, you know, under influence while you're working, I thought was okay. I mean, that's my personal opinion, but after hearing you today, it might change my opinion. But we keep seeing this case over again, but I don't know how to get the message out. I mean, you go through a little bit, but seem like, I mean, every week, every time we have so many DUI cases. I don't know when they're gonna learn. I don't know. And I wish you could come up a way. I mean, you got to talk about going, I mean, you know, doing the law class, doing school, all this thing. I hope you go back and further and see if you could give us advice how to get the message out. I mean, some way, somehow we fail. We fail because, I mean, for 6 years I've been here, I've seen so many cases. Before, I used to say that DUI, as long as they're not under influence while work, it's okay with me. So I say, give them a warning. So you have 2 DUI. So what makes you, how come you didn't get the message after the first one? So I'd like to hear from your perspective, why you didn't hear the warning. I thought all along right now, if we give those guys a warning, they might not commit again, but it seems like it's not working.
At least in my case, you know, it was, when I got my first DUI, it was right out of my second year residency out of pharmacoeconomics and formulary management. So, you know, I just started working, I started making money, and then I got the DUI on Christmas night. And I foolishly thought it was a mistake. It was just one of those rare things that would happen. Like I thought I got unlucky that night, and that's, to be honest, I thought I got unlucky because I was the only one on the road that night, and the cop happened to see me late at night. But the reality is, you know, I did get a citation and a fine, and maybe the idea here is that having people like myself or somebody else go into the schools and actually tell them, you don't even need to get that first DUI because this is what could happen. You know, this is the damage that can happen professionally and just for the rest of your life. At least for me, I thought it was just a unluck that night. So I didn't think it would happen again.
Yeah, it seems like our culture is affecting it. You know, it seems like they take it very lightly, and
yeah.
And I'd like to know is, you know, is there any way that we could get the message out so we could prevent it instead of, you know, keep coming up here all the time. We keep seeing all these cases,
Yeah.
and I hope. But how does the DUI affecting your job performance? I mean, like I say, I usually cannot relate those two because I thought if you do outside, you know, on the weekend, you know, doesn't affect work, it's okay, you know. But in what way that you see it, it's not okay?
I don't think it is because I don't think being a pharmacist ends at 5 p.m. when you get off the job or 10 o'clock when you clock out of work. I think you're a pharmacist through and through, and you have to hold up to the standards of being a professional pharmacist. And it boils down to the law, right? You're breaking the law by doing that. And we took an oath to protect the law, and as a pharmacist, we should be doing that at all times. Criminal laws are put in place to make sure that, you know, serious injuries and harms don't happen. And for some reason, and that I learned in my ethics course, you know, these vulnerabilities and these risk factors or these triggering events, for some reason, even though I knew that, it misplaced my thinking. And I think if I would have known that ahead of time, that these actions of DUIs that can have serious consequences, I don't think I would have done it.
I think the answer is, in your case, you're an alcoholic.
In my case, yes. I can't speak to...
You know, there are people that get DUIs that are not alcoholics.
Yeah, most of our cases not alcoholic.
And so the message that would come from you would be different than the message that would come from somebody who maybe partied too hard one time, if that's a possibility.
Right.
So the problem is, I don't think the message is the same for everybody, other than be careful. You know, and recognize.
My last question is that I hopefully when you come to our Allen's committee and come up with some kind of answer solution to teach us how to get the message out, because we like to see it prevented because we see it quite too many times happening.
Yes, and I was speaking facetiously previously, as I think you realized.
Give us some advice, come up with an answer if you can.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Jarvis, any other questions for Mr. Patel?
No, Your Honor.
All right, I'll offer you the floor for closing comments.
Thank you. Petitioner is an alcoholic, which creates concern for the safety and the protection of the public. His convictions are 5 and 9 years old now, and he has been sober for almost 6 years. Petitioner has done everything the board has asked of him in probation, but to grant this petition would essentially be terminating his probation 1 year early. So I encourage the board to think about the value of an additional year of probation with somebody who does have 2 DUIs with very high blood alcohol contents. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Patel, any final statement?
I wanted to just submit the extra documentation for the expungement for the misdemeanor.
Ms. Jarvis, have you seen a copy of that?
One moment.
Yes. While you look at that, I'll simply ask Mr. Patel, I have marked your petition packet as Exhibit 1 and the decision and order with the underlying decision as Exhibit 2. Do you have any objection to the submission of those documents? All right. With that, I'll move both Exhibits 1 and 2 into evidence.
Should I pass out the document?
You have copies for all of the board members? Very good. So, Ms. Jarvis, this is not a document that you've seen before today?
That's correct.
Okay. And if you could please simply describe it for the record, what we're getting?
This is the document that's just been provided to me, is a petition for dismissal and an order granting dismissal pursuant to Penal Code Section 1203.4. I believe this is for the first DUI?
That is correct.
Okay, so this is for the 2009 DUI. It was filed with the Clerk of the Superior Court on December 7th, 2014. This petition was submitted to the board on December, sorry, I said 2017. This petition was filed with the board on December 7th of 2017. So this was basically at the same time.
All right. I'll mark this as Exhibit 3. Do you have any objection to its admission?
I do not.
All right. Very good. All right, I have marked this as Exhibit 3, and with no objection, I've moved it into evidence, Mr. Patel. And so at this time, I will take this case as submitted on behalf of the board, all right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right. So we're going to take a short recess. You want 5, 10 minutes?
Yeah, let's take 5.
All right, very good. 5 minutes, please.
All right, we're back in session. It's now 1:16. Okay, Your Honor, go ahead.
All right, very good. We have our last petitioner, Sanjay Patel, sitting at the table with Ms. Jarvis. Prior to going on the record, I accepted exhibits from Ms. Jarvis and marked them Exhibits 1 and 2. Ms. Jarvis, I'll have you explain what they are for the record when we get to that point, but I have those before me. Let me just read for the record the OAH case number, which is 2018-051-205 for Sanjay Patel. And I know, Ms. Veal, why don't you, for the record, identify any issues you have with this case?
So Mr. Patel and I worked together in the early 90s with Save-On drugstores.
All right. Though my math may not be perfect, the early 90s seems almost 20 years ago. Is that right?
Which is amazing when you look at me to think I might be actually that old.
Well, that's why I could have guessed much younger for your age. I wasn't really.
Well, yeah, that's why I actually called out that, yes.
Actually, wonderful. Well, I'm glad you did that and not me. But with that, I know you've probably talked to counsel, and it's my understanding then that there's no need to recuse yourself from this case. Is that right?
That's correct, and I also talked to Mr. Patel and told him if he would like for me to step back, I would.
All right, so let me do 2 things. Counsel, for the record.
Based on the information provided, I don't believe there's a disqualifying conflict.
All right, fair enough. Mr. Patel, do you agree with Ms. Veal's statement that approximately 20 years ago that you worked together at the same employer?
Yes, I do.
All right. Do you have any objection with her hearing this matter? Okay. All right. So with that said, that we have a complete record in that regard, I'm going to open the floor to Ms. Jarvis. We do still have everyone with us and a quorum. And Ms. Jarvis, I'll let you do an introduction for us on this case.
Thank you, Your Honor. On May 23rd, 1991, petitioner was issued his pharmacist license. On August 13th, 2014, the instant accusation was filed against petitioner, and by stipulated settlement, effective November 9th, 2015, petitioner was placed on probation for 5 years with the standard terms and conditions of probation. Petitioner has therefore served approximately half, or 2.5 years, of his probation term. Now, all of the circumstances that I'm going to describe here took place between January and August of 2011. For the specifics, please refer to the accusation. It lists in great detail all of the false prescriptions that were filled by petitioner, and I'm really just going to summarize here to explain the scope of this matter for the record. I'm not going to go into each and every specific patient and prescription. But overall, petitioner failed to exercise his corresponding responsibility as a pharmacist for approximately 150 prescriptions. That responsibility is to ensure that prescriptions are valid and issued for a legitimate purpose. Petitioner ignored multiple red flags that have been identified by this board and by the DEA, as are summarized excellently by the board's pamphlet on corresponding responsibility, which can be found on the board's website. Petitioner ignored that patients traveled significant distances to his pharmacy. His pharmacy was located in Huntington Beach. These patients traveled from places including Reseda, Long Beach, Compton, and North Hills for physicians whose offices were in Fountain Valley, West Los Angeles, La Puente, and Panorama City. For those of us up here in Northern California, I did a few quick Google Maps, and essentially all of these patients, for approximately 150 prescriptions, traveled between 34 and 129 miles round trip in the greater Los Angeles area in order to see their physicians and then obtain their prescriptions at petitioner's pharmacy. This in of itself is a huge enough red flag not to fill most of these prescriptions. Many of these prescriptions, however, were also identical. In one day, petitioner filled 16 prescriptions for patients from the same physician's office with identical prescriptions, instructions, etc., for oxycodone. Another day, it was 24 prescriptions with identical prescriptions. 90 tabs or 180 was basically the only difference between these prescriptions. On another date, 8 patients with identical prescriptions for oxycodone and Opana, a highly abused combination. Again, in the accusation, there are more examples listed. Petitioner never attempted to verify a single one of these prescriptions. Petitioner also dispensed early refills for no legitimate or discernible purpose. The accusation identifies 5 of these instances in January through July of 2011, and these prescriptions were from 9 to 28 days early. These prescriptions were only for a 23 to 31 day supply, and so 4 of these 5 prescriptions were filled either on consecutive days and no more than 3 days apart. Petitioner did provide in his petition to the board a letter stating that he has learned a lot from this experience, and he accepts his responsibility for his failures to uphold the laws and regulations governing pharmacy. He has been completely compliant with his probation terms, including 30 hours of remedial education and payment of $9,000 in costs. Petitioner also submitted 52.5 hours of continuing education from March of 2016 through May of 2018. Petitioner submitted 7 letters of recommendation. 4 were verified, 2 were licensees, and 2 are physicians. The remaining 3 letters are from 2 pharmacists and a pharmacy manager, all of whom have worked with petitioner and have observed his work. Of note in these letters, many of the writers note that petitioner has used this disciplinary action to educate the people that he works with and the pharmacies in which he works as to the importance of due diligence and these red flags. Petitioner also notes that in late 2016, he served on a jury and was selected to be the jury's foreman, and he took part in a walk to benefit children and families of blind children. And as well, he was the caregiver to his parents until their deaths from Alzheimer's in January of 2014 and renal disease in January of 2018. I will note also and ask the petitioner to address that in the petition, he checked the no box when asked if he was currently on probation or has ever had a disciplinary action taken against his pharmacist license. Obviously, since we're here and he filed this petition, that's not accurate. And the petitioner did express to me earlier that he wanted to address that with this board. At this time, I'd like to identify the exhibits that, as the judge noted, were previously provided to her. Exhibit 1 is the petition for early termination of probation with the attachments provided by the petitioner. And then Exhibit 2 is the stipulated settlement and disciplinary order in case number 5031. And with that, I will turn the floor over to petitioner to address the board.
All right, Mr. Patel, if you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth under penalty of perjury?
I do.
All right. You're probably going to have to get closer to that microphone to talk to us.
Is that better?
Closer.
Is that better?
No. Nope.
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 It's almost
Have to
at,
speak a little louder, that's all.
you either have to speak louder or,
I'm sorry, I have a low voice, so I'll try my best.
It's getting better.
Well, thank you for seeing me today. I did write a 5-page letter, but it's basically a repeat of what I put in there, but
Right.
it's a summary. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity for me to be here today. My case, a petition for since November 9th of 2015, when I started my probation, I've kept my life really simple to the fact that I've just been ashamed and embarrassed to where I am today. Life really has focused on two things. My family, making sure that I practice pharmacy safely. I lost my mother in 2014 to Alzheimer's dementia, and that was during the fact that it was progressed during the ownership of my pharmacy, where I started taking more time off. After the probation, my main focus has been my dad, who was at end-stage renal disease. I've been fortunate enough, and I'm thank the board, that my probation terms have allowed me to work unsupervised, which I have done willingly. My situation and my experience gone through with other pharmacies and techs that I work with on a daily basis, and I mentor them what I've learned so far. Kept it simple in the sense that I put myself in a box when I started my probation, and all I wanted to do is to take care of my days off. Scheduled my dad's medical appointments. I could be with him throughout. Time has also allowed me to spend more time with my children. Sorry if I'm jumping right now. My main focus now, my family, and raise my 2 children environment with a good foundation, good values and morals. Life right now has been a lot, has been during this time, we've had many adjustments. We've tried not to affect our children. I've accepted the fact that I've come up short. I don't want to give up hope. I know I've let the Board of Pharmacy and my peers and citizens I am deeply sorry. Kept up with my education, kept up with my CEs, RX letter, scripts, Pharmacy Times, Pharmacy Today. Today I respectfully ask the Board of Pharmacy to give my case a kind pharmacy license. Last month, and I was kind of really surprised that I'm here today. You're no surprise when I did get a call. I haven't slept since, so I wanted to thank you for the time. I wanted to keep it short because I know you've got a busy day ahead, so thank you.
all right, Ms. Jarvis, do you have questions for Mr. Patel?
I do. Mr. Patel, what led you into filling these prescriptions without doing your corresponding responsibility?
My pharmacy was in a medical building. Unfortunately, I had a pharmacy here from 1996 to 2005, 80 miles north of here in a town called Willows. We weren't really doing any pain meds. Target as a PIC, we weren't doing any pain meds. I kind of blame myself really because I never thought of that way. I failed in my due diligence. I didn't ask the right questions or ask the right reports. that pharmacy. What struck me was we had a pain clinic down the hallway, and we were surrounded by management doctors. Doctors, the patients, oh, I'm sorry, once you got comfortable with the doctors, comfortable, I had seasoned staff there. I'm not blaming them, but we had, when I took over the pharmacy, for me, nothing seemed strange. The environment that the pharmacy was in. The more I knew, the more I. 2011, I think we had the first DEA. Red flags that you're mentioning. I picked up on that, and I'm thinking, okay, you know what, something's not wrong. Prescriptions that came from Reseda. We had medical sheets faxed to the doctor's office that we requested for these patients, and Is that better?
You're just going to have to get much closer to the microphone.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
Keep coming.
Okay. So, me, this is a learning experience with that pharmacy, unfortunately, at my cost. I went to the DEA in a conference in April, picked up on all this. I even approached the DEA office, and I said, you know what, do you mind if I give you some names of doctors, and would you be able to help me? He goes, well, we can't tell you if we can't give you names, we can't give you any information if they're under investigation.
You still have to come closer to the microphone.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I'm so sorry.
Unfortunately, it should almost feel like you're putting your lips on the microphone.
All right. You don't want me to sing, do you? Sorry. So that day, I decided, I called the pharmacy, and I called the main tech, Chris, and I said, you know what, there's something wrong here. It doesn't feel right. We don't have the information. Let's just stop filling these prescriptions. So what I did during my ownership, very brief ownership of that pharmacy, was I constantly adjusted to what I knew. I constantly asked the questions on the phone. I think the unfortunate thing that I've learned during the ownership of this pharmacy, and the ball dropped here, I had a conversation with a PA in September of 2011. Came in, she was working down the hallway, and she came in the afternoon, and she said, you know, I worked for Dr. So-and-so for the last 2 weeks, and I'm not going to go back. There's something wrong here. So I said, well, what do you mean? I said, we've been verifying prescriptions, and everything's good. She said, no, the whole practice seemed a bit shady. That weekend, I wrote a letter to that doctor saying, you know what, I'm just not going to take any more prescriptions from your practice. And from September onwards, we just started discharging all the patients. I thought I was constantly learning. After the investigation of the board, I came to realize that obviously you guys are the experts. I was learning at this stage, and I've fallen way short of what was required here.
And so what is the purpose for you to get off probation? What do you intend to do with an unfettered license that the board could be assured that this won't happen again in the future?
Fair question. You know, as I said, since the beginning of probation, I've kind of treated myself harshly. I've put myself in a box. The only thing I'm going to think about is practicing pharmacy safely. So I really haven't allowed myself to think beyond what I want to do after my probation ends. I've been in retail all my life. I think I can get, you know, I'm working safely now. I'd like to get back into a full-time job in a pharmacy position, but no more than that. I don't expect wanting to own a pharmacy again. It's just, this experience has just, I think, rattled me in more ways than one. Currently, I travel a 3-hour trip, a 130-mile journey to do my 62 hours a month that I'm fortunate enough to do. You're always on pins and needles because the owner might just say you're no longer needed. At that point, I'll be tolling my probation. So it's the anxiety of being on probation. It's the shame, embarrassment, and the shamefulness that comes with it. And you always think you have a cloud on your head that you're walking around with. I'll share a story with you. September 22nd, 2016, I came to a board meeting. What it was like. Something strange. I felt like a stranger because I didn't feel a part of the team that you guys doing a great job that you do, but I just didn't feel part of it. I felt kind of dirty inside, and that's how I feel right now. I just don't feel clean. I'm doing the best I can. Get out of this situation. It's a big fog, how I've got myself into it. Kind of lost. I just hope you can trust me to do the right thing.
I have no other questions at this time.
Right, very good. Questions from the board, Ms. Beal?
So thanks for coming. I know it's tough to sit, to be in your seat and have us judging you. The prescriptions that you filled, Sanjay, were they mainly from the doctors you felt in the building where your pharmacy was, or were they from outside there? It sounded like one of the doctors perhaps, but what about the other ones?
Right. So we had a doctor in Fountain Valley. We had patients down the hallway. But I think you can appreciate me. When you buy a pharmacy, whether you have a patient there for 10 years, whether you have a patient there for 1
Speak up just a little bit.
Okay. When you have a patient for 1 week, when you just bought the pharmacy, everyone's new to you. You're not familiar with the situation. So in that sense, you're getting a feel of your staff, of what's going on. If they're patting to you on the back and saying something's wrong here, you're going to go with that. At no point did I have an indication that, there's something wrong here. That pharmacy was doing a lot of pain meds before. So we did have doctors from nearby and then out the area, but they gradually came in. What happened was there was a PA working for the doctor in Fountain Valley, and he did a lot of house calls, which I was trying to educate myself, what is this? And I actually went and visited them to check them out. He had a lot of patients in LA, and then he started discharging. So those patients started going to other doctors. And since they were coming to our pharmacy, we kept them on. In hindsight, now, I should have never allowed it. But unfortunately, that's how it all started. And it started around 2 months into my ownership. At that time, I was busy trying to get Medicare accreditation, the licensing, the DEA license. And I had an awful call in January of 2011 from home that I haven't really got into, that led me to take more time off and slowly step away from the pharmacy. That made me started to think about, this is not going to work out.
And then it sounds like when you went to the DEA meeting, that's when kind of the lights started going off.
Yeah, absolutely. We started doing cures. I registered in January of 2011, and we started doing cures reports. But the DEA was something, I was in a pain med situation with the pharmacy that I've never come across at this volume. So I was trying to learn. I went there, and then the light bulb went on. So it's like, okay, you better start screening more and more. We started to scrutinize more. So my findings were, whether they were out of area or whether they were in the OC, it didn't make a difference to me, because you would have been surprised how many patients I had in OC that had bad cures reports that we found, that we discharged those patients. These patients were never monitored. And I want to add that when we did the cures reports and we found these patients, I kept a file at the back with all these patients that had the bad cures reports. But we took it a couple of steps further. I even contacted the doctors, the different doctors, saying, hey, do you know this patient was doctor shopping? So I thought we did our part, but obviously the investigation found that we hadn't. So I want to apologize for that.
Gosh, I had one other question.
Sure.
And so since that time, actually I have two. You've done CE. Would you say your CE has been focused on understanding corresponding responsibility and opioids and all this stuff, or are you just kind of doing CE to keep your license up?
No. So under my probation terms, I had to do 30 hours of CEs with drug diversion, corresponding responsibility, drug abuse, etc. I've done that. I've done more, because unfortunately now I find this topic interesting. The more I know, the more I delve into it. And now, if a patient comes into the pharmacy, there's a running joke. I just say, no, we're not doing it. They look at me and say, no. I said, well, I'll tell you why in a minute. Because I think these days, when you go into a pharmacy, the most frustrating thing I find is that if you're the floater and you've got regular techs there, they'll tell you, if you say, well, why are you questioning? They'll say, well, they're regulars. They've always come here. We know them. I said, well, did you check yours? Do you know anything about the doctor? They said, no. I said, well, we need to start checking everything, put it in checks and balances. I said, I don't care if they're regulars. I don't care if they're new, but you need to have the same standard. So I've learned that what I've done actually is I used to be open. I used to trust everyone. That's the way I'm wired. I just saw the good in people. This is now, I've just kind of closed up. I don't trust anyone anymore. I just don't. When I feel anything, it's harsh, but that's the reality of it.
Last question is, it sounds like you are trying to educate the pharmacists and the technicians that you work with. What do you tell them?
When I have told pharmacists, I said, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, some of these prescriptions. One of the pharmacists told me a response. He said to me, well, I only do 1 or 2. So he knew what he was doing. I said, you know what, 1's too many. I said, there's no point in doing this. I said, learn from my experience. I said, I thought I was doing this. I thought I was documenting it, right? I bought a pharmacy and I just got hit. I wouldn't be doing this. If you're not sure, don't do it. I've gone to pharmacies during my probation period where similar guests have come in from the areas from LA into where I've worked in San Bernardino. We've just turned them away. We know what they're doing, but it's the training, and if you've gone through it before, you would stop it. But I'm not sure if most pharmacists will. I think nowadays you would. 10 years later, I mean, in 2010, I think it was a learning game for me. From since then, it's just been more information, more information, more information. Now it's so obvious that, me it's obvious, but I'm not sure if it's obvious for others.
Obvious because you've had to live it. All right, thank you very much.
Mr. Sanchez?
Thank you for coming. I don't have any questions.
All right. Mr. Weiser?
Thank you very much. And if you could speak.
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure if I'm catching everything that you're saying. So you graduated from pharmacy school in '87.
Correct.
And you bought Medical Towers Pharmacy in 2010?
Correct.
So you practiced pharmacy for 22 years?
Correct.
So I've always felt that a practicing pharmacist develops a gut sense.
Correct.
About their patients or customers, the prescriptions that they bring into the pharmacy to be filled. And so I'm missing the comfort level that I need to find that gut sense that you, in my view, either didn't develop or developed and paid no attention to while all this was occurring?
Well, I think I did have a gut sense to some extent. I think I got blindsided by, I think in the end what I found was the dishonesty of the prescribers and the patients in it all themselves. I'll give you one example. I diligently worked with one doctor in OC, with a nurse, getting the diagnosis every day and day in, day out. But at the end, it was that PA who told me that she worked at that office that's no good. That's when the ball dropped, and I'm thinking, you know what, I am getting conned everywhere. So I know what you're saying. I thought I had my checks and balances, and after 20 odd years, yes, you're right. But this filling pain prescriptions on a daily basis was a totally new experience for me. It's not something I want to repeat, but it was a totally different environment. I mean, if you take my environment, if you took my pharmacy in 96 to 2005 in a small town where everyone knew each other, of each other, it was a totally different setup. What I bought in Orange County was totally different for me. I think you're right. My gut should have been a little bit more better. I think it was a bit more lenient. I'm not saying I'm naive, I'm not street cred, but I haven't had that kind of upbringing to be that raw on the street to relate to all this. I don't have a deceptive mind. I'm afraid to be thinking that way all the time. That makes sense.
Mr. Law, any questions?
I want to ask you, on that medical tower pharmacy, do you have any ownership in it?
No. Do I have it now?
Do you now, or did you have?
Oh, no,
at that time when you filled the prescription, were you part of the owner?
Yes.
You were?
Yes.
Okay.
I owned it.
So would it fair to say you filled the prescription for the profit that you'll be making at that time?
So that's a fair question. When we did fill those prescriptions, the few that were cash were only charged according to the insurance guidelines that we felt fair, and that we charged them at the Medi-Cal rate plus the dispensing fee. We did not gouge any patients at all.
Okay. But now that you understand that facing with all this corresponding responsibility, by doing that, you still would get yourself into trouble.
Right.
And I was just shocked that, like Stan was saying, all this years of practice, you should be in contact with either the professional, the association should know all these things are going on, that you should be aware of the current law that is affecting your profession, and you should be aware of things that's happening. So what have you changed since that?
I've kept up with the CEs. As I said to you, I've really closed up in my screening of patients. I don't trust anyone on how I fill prescriptions anymore. I don't. PIC that I work for, he has a guideline. I have my guidelines too, and if I'm not comfortable, I won't fill a prescription. I think I've come a long way in screening patients that way to ensure the safety. And if I'm not going to be happy with the prescription, I won't fill it anymore.
And the board, we have sponsored quite a few CE with DEA on these corresponding responsibility classes. How many have you attended?
Correct. So I've gone to the one in LA.
When?
That was in 2015. Then I went to, 2011, let me take that back. And then I flew out to Oklahoma in June of 2015. And then a month later, I went to the DEA one in LA again. All three were different formats. The first one was an eye-opener. The second one in Oklahoma was very informative. The third one here in LA that I went to, I would say that was semi-informative. There was more focus on the Narcan that day, on the CE to do the Narcan. So basically, I wanted to update myself in the one in LA for the trends that are here locally. But that helped me a bit. But what I'm finding is it's the same red flags. It's just a different, sometimes it's just a different drug involved. but the same patterns and the red flags are still there.
Okay. All right, no questions, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Lipa?
I think you said that you've been driving 3 hours a day for your work.
Right.
And I think you said that in order to meet the tolling requirements, 62 hours per month.
No, so I work, sorry, let me rephrase that. My requirement is 40 hours a month, but
Right.
I actually work 62 hours a month. And
Okay.
since January, I've also picked up another day at another pharmacy. So I'm fine with that.
Okay,
it's
yeah,
Sure.
I saw 40 hours, and I didn't know where the 62 came from,
No,
so.
that's what I work at that pharmacy in
I see.
Travel.
And how much time would we be cutting off of your probation at this point? Half of it?
Correct.
That's it, thank you.
Dr. Gutierrez, questions?
Yes, thank you. Tell me about the oxycodone. What's a typical starting dose that you would give a patient right now if you were to see him in one of your pharmacies?
Starting with 20 milligram, 20,
20 milligrams, how often?
twice a day.
Okay. And so if you were going to give somebody 240 tablets of that, of the 30 milligrams, does that seem like a lot for a starting dose?
That is, yes.
Okay. What about benzodiazepines and opioid combination? Is there any concern there?
There is. They're additives, so I'd be concerned about that.
Okay. Did you counsel the in terms of looking at these from these patients, do you consider the fact that one of these prescriptions could have overdosed? Something could have happened to the patient. I mean, take the distance aside. I'm looking at the prescription,
correct.
the quantity, the impact to that patient's life that you're filling.
I should have taken better care, I think.
Okay. And Dilaudid also?
Correct.
Okay. And what about cytochrome P450? You familiar with those drug interactions?
Correct.
Would you be worried about that with any of these class of drugs?
I should have been better, yes.
Dr. Shop?
No questions, no questions.
Dr. Wong?
No question.
All right, with that, Ms. Jarvis, any further questions for Mr. Patel?
No, thank you.
All right. Mr. Patel, anything further for the board?
Thank you for listening.
All right. Ms. Jarvis, closing?
Yes, thank you. This case is very concerning to me. This was a large amount of controlled substances that walked out of this petitioner's pharmacy for several months, even after, as he was saying today, he started getting a handle on some of these prescriptions in April of 2011. This continued until approximately August of 2011 that the board inspector was able to determine. That's a lot of controlled substances. Petitioner does here today. He seems to be very remorseful. He's doing what he needs to do to rehabilitate. And he's had a hard run of luck lately, being the sole caretaker for his parents and taking care of them until their respective deaths. 2.5 years is a long time to cut off of a probation term. So I would ask the board to keep all of that into consideration when you're making this decision. Thank you.
Mr. Patel, I've marked 2 documents. Exhibit 1 is the petition with all the attachments, and Exhibit 2 is the stipulated decision and order by the board. Do you have any objection for the admission of those 2 documents?
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right, very good. I'll move those 2 documents into evidence, and I'll take the matter as submitted on behalf of the board. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay, right now, the board's going to go into closed sessions for deliberations, so all of you going to be excused for now. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you, Christina.